Let's see if I can. Okay. Looks like we're live. I still didn't fix the background, but whatever. Looks like it'll be what it is for now. Sorry, I just got too much going on. I worked not on YouTube, just outside of YouTube. I worked 65 plus hours this week. I've just been really busy, which seems to be kind of like the theme every Monday night. I'm sort of like tearing at the seams here in terms of getting things done, but we're still doing it. We still like doing this, and we're going to continue to do it, so no worries. But yes, welcome everyone. This is an Andres Restart stream. Technically not calling it the podcast, mainly because whenever I am just doing things by myself, I just brand it as a Q&A as opposed to a podcast, but effectively we're still going to be talking. This is a little bit more focused on me taking your questions and talking about those things, but I do have a few planned topics as well, so that's pretty much it. There's a few questions I got beforehand. I did sort of share out things a little bit later than usual, so I didn't get that many questions ahead of time, but there is a few. And so, you guys in the chat, I am dependent upon you to offer up more content in terms of ideas to discuss. If there's anything you want to talk about, it doesn't have to be Nintendo related, but preferably, because this is a Nintendo channel, that's what most people are here to talk about Nintendo. But you want to ask me something about my personal life or random stuff, fair game. So yeah, tonight we're gonna eventually talk about my excitement for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's coming out this Friday. I've been playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm pretty sure I'm going to finish Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the second time. Okay, it's not my first time. I played it when it came out in 2017. I've been a Xenoblade fan since Project Rainfall on the Wii when Xenoblade came to the States. So, I'm all in. I've been all in. I'm finally finishing New Game Plus is where I'm getting at here. And I believe I will be done by the time Friday comes around, so I can get right into Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So we're talking about that. We're talking about Nintendo's plan for Zelda. What is that exactly? What are they doing with Breath of the Wild 2? What are they doing with Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD? As sort of time progresses where we don't get Zelda information, the question becomes ever more prevalent. What is going on with Zelda? So we're going to be talking about that tonight. So, that's part of the plan. And then we're going to be talking about an actual legitimate F-Zero rumor. Now, that may sound contradictory, legitimate and rumor, right? Well, when I say that, I'm simply trying to imply that this rumor for F-Zero isn't just like some random 4chan post. This isn't just like pie in the sky, hopeful speculation. There is something to this that is offering credence, and it's maybe why you've seen this reported on bigger channels or journalistic sites as well, because where it's coming from, there seems to be a pretty solid track record. So we're going to be talking about that today. That information came out this past week, so those things I will at some point discuss on my own terms, but if you guys bring it up in the chat, we'll talk about it then, or anything else. And that is the general plan. So guys, please let me know how everything is looking and sounding. Again, my babble in the beginning was simply me alluding to the missing sound pad thing. This room is like a hot box. I've told you guys before, this is a temporary thing. I'm currently staying with my brother, and I will eventually get my own place. And I am planning on having a separate, dedicated studio, not a bedroom, an actual studio for the channel. But it's going to take some time. It's going to take a couple months. So that will happen. But in the meanwhile, I have to deal with this hot box of a room where the walls are constantly expanding and these pads fall off. I need to figure out a way to kind of keep them on. So, I recently decided to start using the fan. But with the fan, there's air. The air causes movement. And those pads come off. So, hopefully they don't fall off during the stream and I have to be like, hey, look, they fell again. But, we're working on it. So, let's check in with you guys here in the chat. Again, let me know how everything is looking and sounding. If you guys could like the stream, super helpful. Share it out to others, super helpful. I would appreciate that very much. I said this in the chat, but for those listening, just so it's known, Megaton Menace had added me first and said, please do not discuss Xenoblade Chronicles 3 leaks or rumors. Would like to be hyped without having it ruined. Well, yeah, no rumors, no leaks here for Xenoblade 3. The game's coming out this Friday. And to tell you the truth, I personally, while I do plan on covering the game somehow, that's my plan, I'm not like diving into leaks or rumors. I don't care for that. The game's coming out this Friday. I don't need to know what the story is about days before the game's going to come out. I'm going to play the game, which is heavily story centric, and enjoy it, right? Like, there are things that I have allowed myself to be spoiled on when it comes to media that I watch, but there's a slightly different situation, right? So, for example, Hunter x Hunter, I'm actually rewatching it for like maybe the third or fourth time, but with my brother, and it's awesome. But the series director has gone on several hiatuses. The series has not progressed beyond, well, it has progressed beyond the anime, but the manga still has so much more room for growth. The series is actually about as old as One Piece. One Piece is one of the biggest animes ever. They recently had over 1,000 episodes a few months ago. The manga's even further ahead, obviously, and it's consistently going. And recently, I think the creator announced that he's planning on ending the series within about 3 years. They're in like the final big overall arc, so that's exciting. But then you look at Hunter x Hunter, where the story takes breaks, and indefinite breaks, sometimes for years. And the manga's coming back, which is cool, so we're going to learn more about that story. But the premise or the idea of Hunter x Hunter coming to a conclusion anytime soon is just so lofty. So I will sort of indulge, to indulge myself in some of the manga stuff, because yes, I want to learn more about Hunter x Hunter. So I guess in a way I will sort of spoil myself on that, because I have no idea when the anime will return. There may never be another anime. So things like that, I'm more inclined to sort of spoil myself on. Or another example, it's another anime example, the new Dragon Ball superhero movie. I'm not going to say what happens there, but I definitely was 100% on the spoiler train for that. But the difference is, Dragon Ball's not really about the story. So I just kind of wanted to see what was going to happen, because it would be cool. And when I'm going to watch it when it comes out in theaters here like next month, it's going to be super exciting. I completely forgot. Okay, anyway, I just realized there's going to be like a few things happening on the same time. Anyways, I will not be spoiling Xenoblade Chronicles 3 here. I have not spoiled myself on it. I do not plan to. I'm going to be focused on doing my thing, playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and on Friday, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is happening, and it's gonna be amazing. So yeah, there we go. Let's see here. Charles Fidel, hello there. DE Fox, hello, thank you for modding. Paul Dune, hello. You started Minish Cap for the first time today. I love Minish Cap. That might be my favorite handheld Zelda. It's really, really good. J.R.L. Tolkien, honest question. Does the manner in which Nintendo handles its business, shadow drops versus directs, radio sounds for years for major franchises, ever frustrate you? Okay, let's talk about that. So I think this is a little bit of a multifaceted sort of answer that I'm going to provide, because there is Andres the fan, there's Andres the content creator, and those two things sometimes conflict or sometimes overlap with each other. So, for example, on this channel we do a lot of speculation, we try to analyze, we try to predict, right? It's fun to do that. But, sometimes for fun, I will put out a prediction. And, I'll do my research and I'll predict things. And at the end of the day, I'm biased. We all are. Anyone who says they're not biased, they're lying, or they're just naive or juvenile, or maybe they're just that. So I'm gonna stick to that. There's bias, so you can never be foolproof regardless. But anyway, I would predict when Breath of the Wild 2 would come out, or when we would get news on it, and I feel pretty good about some of my predictions, but when it comes to Breath of the Wild 2 release timing, I've been off many times. And that's disappointing whenever I find out that Breath of the Wild 2 is not going to be happening. It's disappointing from one angle because, well, I'm wrong, right? And I'm publicly wrong, so there's a little bit of shame there, and I gotta take the L on that. And I will do that. I'll try my best to own up to it. But I'm not excited about that, right? Like, if I go ahead and I put out a prediction for Breath of the Wild 2, I spend hours on a video, and then some people call me an idiot for saying it's then, and then I'm wrong. Well, they're not right necessarily that I'm an idiot, but, you know, in that moment, they probably feel vindicated, right? And I feel not so vindicated, so that hurts. But in reality, you know, no one really knows when this game's going to come out. Well, maybe some people have an idea based off inside information, but point is, the game is slated for spring 2023. If it doesn't come out then, if it doesn't come out in March, that's because the game wasn't ready, and that's hard to predict because development is fluid. So, you know, if someone's wrong on something like that, then whatever. So sometimes it can be frustrating simply because, you know, you get things wrong, right? But as a fan, on one hand, yes, I'm disappointed I don't get to play Zelda. I don't get more information on Zelda. Zelda's my favorite franchise. That is a little disappointing when I don't get that Zelda information when I've been really wanting it. You know, like when we didn't get E3 this year and we still haven't gotten that Zelda information, that's disappointing, you know? Or how Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD still haven't been announced. It's starting to look like they might not make it out this year. I'm not saying for sure, but it's starting to look like that, right? Like there's definitely a relatively good amount of doubt in them coming this year. So now I'm thinking, man, when are we getting Breath of the Wild 2 information? Man, I would love to play Wind Waker or Twilight Princess on my Switch, but we're not getting that information. So as a fan, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could kind of play those or learn more about those sooner. So there's some frustration on that end. But is that something that I should fault Nintendo for? Not necessarily. It's just kind of, you know, that's just the way things are. Now, I'll also say that while that all may be the case, it isn't like I have a lack of games to play. That's not at all true. Right now, I'm racing to beat Xenoblade Chronicles 2 before Xenoblade Chronicles 3 comes out. I could be playing through the Bayonetta series right now. There's a whole bunch of games on my Switch I haven't gotten around to, never mind other systems. But, like, I don't have a lack of games to play. There's a number of good games that are coming out that I'm passing up on. I still haven't downloaded the Monster Hunter Rise DLC, and I love Monster Hunter. I want to get into that. The recent game that came out, Live Alive, I'm curious about that game. I would love to get into it, but do I have the time for it? Not really. You know, I still haven't picked up Switch Sports. I still haven't picked up Mario Strikers. I planned on doing it, but I'm just so busy. So, you know, I'm not necessarily mad if a Zelda game doesn't come out when I want it to come out, because I have so many games to play. But at the same time, there is a part of me that's like, man, I wish I learned more about it sooner, right? So there's some of that. Now, do I ever sort of have it take issue with Nintendo's business practices, though, right? That's a whole other beast. And no, maybe it's because I'm a fanboy and I just don't really, I don't know. I guess I just don't really expend too much mental energy on how Nintendo operates. Like, I think Nintendo actually operates quite intelligently. I think they're a very healthy business. I think compared to most companies, they're not doing anything too sleazy. Now, you know, not trying to say Nintendo is like the model for all ethics and values. No company should be, because they're a company. But they do, it is part of their brand to be family friendly. It is part of their brand to be, I guess, politically correct. And, you know, those are things that it's hard to really fault Nintendo in. Now, some people take issue with how Nintendo they don't necessarily release all their virtual console games or their old games. Some people take issue with Nintendo on how they handle their online. And some people take issue with how Nintendo prices things. But the true fact of the matter is it's a business, and Nintendo prices things the way they do because they value their brand, and they can get away with it. And while that may sound maybe unfair to some people, it's kind of it's business. Like, if it's gonna sell at that price, it's gonna sell at that price. And if it's not gonna sell at that price, then you know what? They're gonna take the L there, right? Like, Nintendo's taking some L's. Look at the Wii U. The beginning of the 3DS wasn't amazing. You know, like, it's not like Nintendo's always super successful. Sometimes, you know, they try to ride the power of their brand, and it doesn't work out so well, right? Like, I think Nintendo thought the Wii brand was so strong that the Wii U would have done amazing, and they, in a way, try to write they tried to write the coattails of the Wii brand, but the Wii brand really wasn't that strong, because the Wii U didn't perform well. I don't think if Nintendo were to release a Wii 2, I don't think it would do that well. I think, you know, it was successful for a brief amount of time, and it was for an audience that was not sustainable. And Nintendo, you know, made a mistake there, right? Hindsight's 2020, you know, these different things. Point is, they're not perfect, but it's not about, it's just business. It's just how things went. So I don't really take issue with how Nintendo handles things. Now, do I sometimes think that they could have done things a little better? Maybe. You know, I'm not sure I love the fact that we're not getting a Direct. I'll say, actually, you know, I'll give you that. I'll say that the Direct, there being no summer Direct, like a big E3 style Direct, is disappointing. That is disappointing. And as a content creator trying to sort of figure out what's happening next, is it frustrating? I wouldn't say it's frustrating, because I appreciate, like, the challenge of trying to figure out what's going on. And it's the curveballs, the unpredictability makes things interesting, right? Because otherwise we could just predict, oh, there's going to be a Direct at the beginning of June every year. Oh, there's going to be a Direct in the third week of September every year. Oh, there's going to be a Direct in the second week of February every year. Like, I think it's interesting when things don't exactly happen the way they did in previous years. Of course, you know, I still use history to predict things, but it's only one of the ways you can sort of figure stuff out. So it's multifaceted. There's some levels of frustration because I want that information, but it's not like I'm angry at it. It's just, for whatever reason, Nintendo decided to do that. Now, why did they decide to not have a Direct and just do these shadow drops instead and the partner showcase instead? That, I don't know. Maybe they just decided to experiment with it, see how it works. Maybe that's really all it is. They saw an opportunity to share things in a different way to see if it would be more impactful and successful. My opinion, I don't know if it's going to be more impactful or successful, but I do think that it's less fun. So, you know, I hope the Directs return. The Directs aren't going away. So I'm not worried about that, but I do hope we see the return of the big summer Direct. I think Nintendo just wanted to do things a little differently this time around, just because it's Nintendo. They're going to experiment with different ways to share their information. So, you know, sometimes I'll be disappointed if we don't get a Direct, but the information is still coming at the end of the day. But when, the question of when, yes, it's both interesting and challenging, but also a little frustrating because, well, where's my Zelda? Where's my Metroid, right? But anyways, moving on to another question or topic. Master Gundam, yes, I also hope we get Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Hello there, guy you don't know, how are you? Ray Day, I don't know what I said. I know these are comments from earlier on in the discussion. Having hope, hello there. Paul Dunn, what do you want more? A Minish Cap remake or an Oracle remake? Oh man, that's a tough one, because as I just said earlier, Minish Cap is one of my favorite handheld Zeldas. It is my favorite handheld Zelda. But on the flip side, I have not actually played the Oracle games. Those are one of the few Zelda games I have not played. I think is it the only ones I have not played? I don't count the CDI games. There might be. I didn't play Triforce Heroes or one of the Four Swords games. But those to me almost fall into like spin-off territory. So I'm not sure. Like they do fall into the Zelda timeline, but they feel spin-off to me. I don't know, but yeah, Minish Cap is my favorite handheld game, but the Oracle games I have not played yet, and I would love to do that. Maybe I would prefer them more. I think they're both developed by, no, they are both developed by Capcom. The Capcom developed Zeldas are pretty good, from what I've heard of some of them. I only played Minish Cap. So it's a tough call, which one I would like to get remade. I'll say I would prefer the Oracle games to be remade. Why? Because since I haven't played the Oracle games, I love the idea of playing them remade, because it's basically just a whole new Zelda game for me. That's effectively how not Minish Cap, Link's Awakening was, because that was actually a Zelda game I had not played, but they remade it and I played it and I loved it. It was great. So, you know, I'll go with the Oracle games because I have not played them before. But what's also interesting about them is because it was Oracle of Ages and Seasons. They had two different versions, which were basically like different games, right? Slightly different like stories and different dungeons, right? There was some ideas and some plans for maybe a third version. It would be interesting to see a remake that sort of encompasses the ideas of Ages and Seasons and that theoretical third version as well. So that would be exciting to see, on top of the fact that it would be more of a new game for me personally, but also for those reasons. Minish Cap, I don't know what you would do to Minish Cap. I mean, I'm sure there's a number of things you could do to Minish Cap, but I think just redoing Minish Cap as is would be fine, because it's a splendid game as is. I see here I got a super chat from Nish Quick Pops. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat, Pops. I really appreciate it. What are you saying here? I seriously can't believe Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is less than a week away. I haven't been this hyped for a game in a while. Right there with you. Earlier today, I saw on Twitter like 4 days until the release of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I was like, wow, we're really only 4 days away. It's insane how quickly time has passed. And I think part of that has to do with the fact of how well Nintendo's handled the media cycle for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Like, the game was rumored for a little bit before it was announced, but once it was finally announced, which was just this February, I mean, it's been almost a steady flow of information leading up to its release. We're towards the end of July, right? Like, that's like what? That's just a 6-month window. That's a fantastic window. So when you think of it from that perspective and consider how Nintendo could handle things for other games, maybe that's when we see the next big Zelda, for example. Because when I say next big Zelda, I mean Breath of the Wild 2. That game, I believe, is coming out, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier. I have a history of being wrong about big Zelda release, Breath of the Wild 2 releases specifically. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, you should take it with a grain of salt regardless, because this is just my opinion based off pure speculation. But Breath of the Wild 2, I believe, is coming out March 2023, because typically Nintendo has a big game to close the fiscal year. And typically also Nintendo puts a spring timing for their games, especially when it's a big game that comes out March to close out the fiscal year. And there's a history of Breath of the Wild, the initial Breath of the Wild coming out March 2017. It did pretty well itself. So I can see it happening. I mean, it could come out March, but it could also conceivably come out April, May, and even early June based off the technical spring timing, right? Like, it could come out late March, between late March and early June, technically. So, you know, I could see that, but I think the best bet, assuming it's not delayed, is March. So with that in mind, notice how I was just talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and how it's had a splendid sort of 6-month sort of media cycle. I think once Breath of the Wild 2 is re-shown off to the world, Nintendo may be thinking of having a similar sort of media cycle, right? Because Breath of the Wild 2 has essentially only been teased to us a couple times, and we haven't really gotten any substantial information. We haven't gotten anything that's significant. Like, the first Xenoblade Chronicles 3 trailer was more information about that game than we've gotten about Breath of the Wild 2 in the 3+ years that it's been officially announced. So I think Breath of the Wild 2 hasn't really even been fully announced yet. Like, we don't even have a name for it yet, really. So, you know, to my point, I think that 6-month window might be the sweet spot for Nintendo. I think that's what they may be thinking, which really puts us in a position to get Breath of the Wild 2 information in a theoretical September Nintendo Direct. Will they have a Nintendo Direct in September? I feel like the answer is probably yes. We usually don't miss out on big September news. That I would say the September Direct is more consistent than the E3 Direct. So, yeah, I think there's a good chance there's going to be a September Direct. And if Breath of the Wild 2 really is coming out March, that's when they're going to start the blowout. They're probably going to give us a big trailer then. And then information will be coming out between September, leading up, between September and March. It's going to be a whole lead up to that. Similar to how they handled Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but probably on a bigger scale because Zelda is a bigger franchise than Xenoblade. Not to slight Xenoblade because I love it, one of my top 5 favorite franchises, but, it's just factual information. Zelda is huge. It's one of Nintendo's biggest franchises. So, yeah, I'm kind of sort of envisioning that that's when we see Breath of the Wild 2 again. But I'll get to the full-on dedicated Zelda topic in a bit. I'm going to take a break from the live chat here because there's a few questions I had asked before the show. And actually, let's see, I have one on Discord here. I don't pay attention to my Discord all the time, so if you guys ever send me messages on there, don't feel upset that I don't get to it. It's more of I just don't look at my Discord that often. But yeah, guy you don't know, you're in the chat. You had asked me a question, and I'm gonna get to it now. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna read out what you said, just so other people are on the same page, and then we'll talk about it. So let's see here. There's a topic I would like to hear you discuss on your podcast, which is the notion being made by a portion of Nintendo fans that Nintendo has been releasing unfinished games throughout the Switch era. I've seen this commonly referred to as the finish it later approach, with notable examples being Kirby Star Allies, Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush, and most recently Nintendo Switch Sports and Mario Strikers Battle League. This argument has noticeably gained more traction as time has passed, and I think it has altered the way some people judge certain Nintendo games. I'd love to hear your take on this subject. So, this is interesting because technically, I didn't buy Kirby Star Allies. Technically, I didn't buy Tennis Aces or Super Rush. I do intend on getting Switch Sports and Mario Strikers. Strange. I can't believe I've like skipped out on all these like Nintendo games. Like, it's just to my point. I don't always have the time to get to them. Like, Nintendo doesn't send me like review copies of them. I even if they did, I'm not sure. I mean, I would love to do that. Maybe that'll happen at some point, but time is just a huge restraint for me right now. So I have to pick and choose, like most people. But I do know a decent amount about those games. I do love most of those franchises. I've played the Mario Tennis games before, the Mario Golf games before, Kirby games before, Strikers and Switch and the sports series as well. And obviously I paid attention to them from a news perspective. But I'll say that. Hold on, water. Give me a second. Okay. So I think that I'm personally not that bothered by it. Now, I'm personally not that bothered by it because I think that concept feels very anti-Nintendo. I think Nintendo in general focuses on giving a proper, full, complete experience. But then, to the point you're addressing, right, or you want me to address here, it feels like some of these games aren't coming out and being a full experience. Given that I didn't play those specific games you mentioned from beginning to end in its entirety, it's hard for me to give like a solid opinion on that. But from what I've heard and seen, my take is, well, Kirby Star Allies is a little bit different than those other games. All those other games are more multiplayer party game centric, right? They have an online component to them. I think the idea sort of stems from how they handle Splatoon. And Splatoon, there's been this argument as well, where the game comes out and the single player campaign doesn't last that long. There's only a few maps, only a few weapons and things of that nature. And people are like, oh, this game barely has any content. It's not worth $60. But there's so much free content coming out after the fact. It's significant for a decent amount of time. That's kind of part of the Splatoon sort of hook. Like when the game comes out, there's new stuff being added frequently for a while. So do I think that's a bad business model? I mean, actually, I think it works for Splatoon, and I'll say that I've never felt personally from the Splatoon games like I bought a lesser experience, like a not proper, fully priced $60 game. I didn't feel like they were cheating me in any way. But it also came with the promise of free content, continue updating the game. And it does add value to the game, but I guess if you were to ask me if I were to get Splatoon 1 or 2, and if there were no free content added afterwards, and I just got what came on day one and nothing else, would I feel like that's a good deal? That's a tough question to answer, because they intended things to happen in a certain way. I think there's so much content to enjoy initially, specifically Splatoon 2, that I think it'd be fine. I think it works, but I also think that a fair criticism of the game would be that it could have more content, right? But just because a game has a criticism, a con, that doesn't mean it's not necessarily worth it, you know? Like, there could be a really good game, but it only lasts 10 hours. Does that mean the game's not worth getting anymore because it only lasts 10 hours? What if those 10 hours are amazing? So, and that's up for every individual person to decide. I would say, given how much I enjoy Splatoon and how replayable the content is, given that a lot of it is multiplayer online centric, even with the base packages, they hold up. It doesn't necessarily need the free content, but the fact that all of that additional free content is coming out for a decent amount of time, there's going to be events and things of that nature, that ups the value of the game significantly, but it is kind of a big part of its allure. So looking at these other games that sort of have somewhat similar like structures, and I think that's kind of part of why Nintendo does that, to kind of keep people engaged with those online games for a little while. I get why they're doing it, because they want to sort of facilitate an online playing community that has reason to come back to it for a while, right? And it keeps the conversation about those games going for a while, and thus more people will hear that conversation a month or two after the game's release and come back to it. For example, I intended getting Switch ports when it initially came out, but reviews came out and they were saying, oh, there's not that much content in it, and I was just kind of busy, and I still am. I haven't gotten around to buying it yet. But once the golf is added, I gotta double check when it's getting added. It's probably not that far off from now. Once the free golf is added, I may pick up the game. I'm gonna hear about the golf stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, now it's time to pick it up, because I have some family members that love playing Wii Golf, so I would pick it up because the golf would be there, and I know that they would enjoy playing that. So it would remind me of the game and then go back into it, right? And that kind of goes to show you the structure of having free content to come out after a game's release for a while. It keeps people talking about the game for a longer amount of time, thus increasing their sales. So from a business perspective, I think it makes sense. Now the question is the game worth it for you with its initial base package? And that's up for every individual person to decide, right? I was really into getting Switch ports. I honestly just didn't have time. That was it. If I had time, I would have gotten it, and I probably would have enjoyed it, because I like what they've shown with the games they have so far, but I will enjoy it more with the free content. And I think there's another point to bring up here. The content is free, right? It's not like Nintendo's charging you for this content that's coming out after the fact. They're not doing that. So If it was something you had to pay for after the fact, that's a whole other conversation, right? Because then the argument goes from, oh, okay, Nintendo's releasing these games, and there's going to be some people arguing, well, it's an unfinished game, and they're charging us more money to get more of that, to get the full game, even though we already paid $60. And that's where things will start to feel a little sleazy, right? But Nintendo's not doing that really with their games. But going back to the situation, though, when you deem it as an unfinished game, that connotation doesn't feel right? Like, why would you want to buy a game that's unfinished? Would you buy a car that works? It's perfectly functional, and for the most part, it is what you wanted it to be. But there's a few little nice little things that won't get added until afterwards. Say, for example, like Bluetooth audio. I don't know, right? Like something that's pretty standard in most cars, newer cars today, relatively new. Like, I think, yeah, that wouldn't feel right, but it's also, video games are not a car, you know? I don't know, it's tough. Again, it comes down to if you think the content that's there is already worth it. And I'll say, because most of these games are multiplayer-centric games, there's a lot of replay value and a lot of fun to be had there. Like, I would say with the base content with Turf War in Splatoon, that you could get hundreds of hours out of that without needing any additional items or maps added. That just adds more variety to it. So, you know, it's a tough call. It's a tough call, and it comes down to how much you enjoy the multiplayer in these particular games. Now, in the case of Kirby Star Allies, I didn't buy Kirby Star Allies. That game I didn't buy intentionally, not because I was busy, not because I was short on money or anything like that. It was purely just because I didn't think it was something I would enjoy. Not that much. I played the demo and I just didn't feel it. But from what I have heard of the DLC, and I could be mistaken, it was pretty much just free characters, right? And they continually added free characters. So, you know, I don't even know if that's really that big of a deal. So, I don't really have a problem with what Nintendo's doing. Because at least I don't have a problem with the concept, but ultimately it comes down to the execution of what comes in the base package. I do think that base package should still be worth the $60 price tag. I think it is a little weird for a game to come out and for it to not be worth the $60 price tag, right? Like, if we could assess the value of a game like that, which you really can't, because it's super subjective. I think the intent behind the free content coming out afterwards isn't to bring in this content to make the game complete or finished. I think the intent is for the game to be what it is meant to be when it releases, but there is planned content to come out afterwards, not so much so it all of a sudden now becomes worth $60, because it should be worth $60 if that's what they release it as initially, but so they can keep people talking about the game, keep the online community going for a while longer. That's the main point about it, to bolster sales. So that's why I think it's done. I don't think it's done so they can release an unfinished game. That's not why it's done. And I'll say, in the case of Switch Sports, I think that game is actually like only $40. So that game's not even like a $60 game. It's already priced lower than most other games. And yet they're adding more free content throughout the year. So a little bit of a different situation there. Anyway, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on it. But if you want me to expand on it more, just ask me. So I'm going to come back to the live chat here. Let's see. Try and catch up. Master Gundam, do you think Metroid Prime remake will come out this year? Love that question. Let's go into it. Yes, I do. Now, am I super 100% convinced, like, I know it's coming out this year? I do not know it's coming out this year. In fact, I'll say there's a decent chance that it doesn't come out this year. Like, if we're being fully frank here, I think Nintendo can get away with not announcing a single other game for this year and be totally fine from a sales perspective. Totally fine. But that doesn't mean they won't announce another game, right? And I think a lot of people will look to November and see the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's coming out then. That's going to be a huge game. That could be the best-selling game for Nintendo this year. There's a really good chance of that because every mainline Pokemon game is like in the top 10 best-selling games on Switch. Like, it's crazy. So Scarlet and Violet being a whole new generation, and probably, at least from an optics perspective, it's pretty clear, is going to be the better new generation on the Switch. Because, yeah, I mean, you look at Sword and Shield, I enjoyed those games. Don't get me wrong, but, I mean, Scarlet and Violet look like a bigger deal. It's actually going to be an open world Pokemon game, like, truly. So there's going to be a substantial sort of increase in terms of, I guess, the eyes of most potential buyers that this game is more ambitious. And this is pretty typical for Pokemon games. The second generation is always significantly more advanced from a technical perspective than the first one. It's pretty par for the course there. But anyway, that's simply to illustrate that Scarlet and Violet has huge sales potential, could end up being the best-selling Pokemon game on Switch. The only reason I wouldn't say it won't be is because we're so late into Switch's life cycle already. That could impact its potential sales, but we'll see how things go. It's a big deal. But with that in mind, is there any reason to believe that they could have another game to come out in November, Nintendo? And my opinion is, yeah, definitely. Nintendo has released the last few holidays multiple published games per month around that time. It's not like we're stuck with one published game per month. And don't give me, it's Scarlet and Violet, two different games. It's one game with two different names with slightly different stuff. Like an actual whole other game. Like, that's not out of the ordinary. That's usually what happens. Just last year we had Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Shin Megami Tensei 5. And at the end of October, what released? Super Mario, Mario Party Superstars. And then not too long before that was Metroid Dread in October. So you had a lot of major games that came out within that window. Not to mention, Nintendo did intend on releasing Advance Wars 1 to Reboot Camp in December. It got delayed. I think they had something else that came out in December as well. I think it was Big Brain Academy or something like that. Point is, they have a lot of games that come out around that time. So to look at November and October and say there can be no other game, I mean, literally just last year, just 6-7 months ago, or 8 or 9 months ago, we saw Nintendo do something that would suggest they would have more games coming out this year. So with that in mind, it's totally within the realm of possibility that there will be more. But then let's also consider that Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope isn't being published by Nintendo in all regions. That game was developed by Ubisoft and is coming out this October. Bayonetta 3 is being published by Nintendo, is funded by Nintendo. And it will not be on other platforms. So, it's almost effectively first party. But it is being developed by Platinum Games, who is not owned by Nintendo at all. It's an entirely separate third-party developer. It's a partnership, right? Maybe you could call it like a second-party product. Point is, it's not made by internal Nintendo either. Then you take a look at Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Yes, Nintendo owns Pokemon to a degree. Yes, you will not see Pokemon on anything else but Nintendo and mobile. And the mainline Pokemon games are always going to be on Nintendo systems. But Game Freak is not owned by Nintendo. Game Freak is the company that develops Pokemon, but they sometimes develop things outside of Pokemon on other platforms. Only point I'm bringing up with this is simply that it's also not an internal Nintendo game. So, really what I'm getting at here is that typically we see at least one Nintendo internal project per year towards the latter half end of the year. Now we're getting Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that's internal Nintendo. Splatoon 3, that's internal Nintendo. So you could say, that's enough. We don't need another. And maybe you're right. But for the holidays, typically we get one. So I would be a little surprised if we don't get at least one internal Nintendo game for the holidays, which brings me to your question of Metroid Prime Remake. I believe Metroid Prime Remake is real. I believe it's being made by Retro Studios, the initial developer for Metroid Prime, and they're developing it now, finishing it up. They're probably already done, but they're releasing that, and they were working on it alongside Metroid Prime 4. This lines up with, what we've heard from certain industry insiders, such as Emily Rogers and Jeff Grubb and Imran Khan. I think these are all pretty darn credible people. These are all known industry insiders. They are not like just random people that we don't have a face to. Like, these are known, trusted sources. And recently, Jeff Grubb did really double down on Metroid Prime, the remake that we've known about for a while, coming out to celebrate the 20th anniversary this November. Now, could he be wrong? He could be wrong, But I believe in the guy. I think he's probably right, and I think it lines up with what I believe Nintendo's doing. I think Nintendo wants to have something Metroid come out pretty much every calendar year for a while. I think Metroid Dread was supposed to be the beginning. I think they're going to continue that throughout this year. They had the free DLC to sort of maintain that Metroid Dread conversation in the first half of the year. And I think soon they will announce Metroid Prime Remake, and it will come out, I'm thinking November, alongside Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And that's going to be kind of like the Metroid goodness for this year. Now, what'll happen next year? It's also rumored that we will get a 2 and 3 remaster as well. They will not be nearly as significant of revamps as the Prime one that I call a remake, but, remaster. Such a large spectrum there. But point is, 2 and 3 probably going to be more akin to what they did for Skyward Sword HD, as opposed to what they did maybe for like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I would put Metroid Prime Remake, from what we've heard, to probably be something closer to that. I don't know, but that's just kind of what my gauge is sort of feeling. And then eventually we get Prime 4, and then there'll be other Metroid stuff as well. The idea is that Nintendo's going to revitalize the Metroid brand, and we're going to come back to an age where we see like sort of consistent Metroid games. That'll be lovely. I think that's what Nintendo's trying to do, and I think a Metroid Prime remake this holiday lines up with that perfectly. So yeah, I do think Metroid Prime Remake is coming out this November. I could be wrong, but I think it lines up with the rumors, and the rumors are coming from credible places. So I do believe it. If I would bet money on it. If someone wanted to make a money wager with me, I would make a small money wager. Now, I'm not really a betting man per se. Like, I don't like to gamble. But this is one of those things where I'd be like, okay, I probably would win this bet. So, I'm just simply saying that to illustrate that I think it's greater than a 50% chance the Metroid Prime Remake comes out for this holiday. That's my take. Joey CJ, I'm glad that you're glad that I'm streaming. Yes, Ray Day, I'm one of the initial Xenoblade fans. I'm not an initial Xeno fan, though. There's a huge fan base, or is it a huge fan base? There is a fan base for the Xeno series as a whole that goes beyond the days of Xeno games on Nintendo. So, I would love to go back and try those games at some point as well, but it ain't easy. Okay, Joyce, I see you have a question for me. I haven't seen it yet because I'm still pretty early on in the chat, but I will get there. I had a bit of a chat jump, so it's hard for me to sort of see where we're at here. Okay. Mike Odyssey, what is up, buddy? How you doing? What do you think President Bowser had for dinner? I think he had mashed potatoes, chicken, and carrots. I know it's not like necessarily that exciting of a meal, but it's hearty, it's healthy, and it's good. That's what I think. So I'll stick with that. Having hope. Anything Zelda and Xenoblade, I'm ready to talk about those. Yeah. Charles Joy saying you saw no problems on my side. I guess I'm fairly behind the chat then. Because this is probably from you guys talking about earlier on when I was asking if everything looks and sounds good. I need a haircut. I think it's time. Or a style change. But we'll figure that out later. Anyway. Let's see here. Yeah, Ray Day, I agree. If someone spoils Xenoblade Chronicles 3, we're throwing hands. Totally agree there. Not literally, it's not a threat, don't worry. But don't do it, because yes. Super Luigi Kong. Do you think we'll get a Zelda-themed OLED for Breath of the Wild 2 like we were getting for Splatoon 3? Man, that's a tough question. That is a tough question because, like, I don't know, man. Like, okay, let me explain instead of just saying I don't know. I think it's tough because there is this sort of like discussion and pipe dream of a hope that Nintendo's planning something a little bit bigger than a Switch OLED Breath of the Wild 2 edition. I think there's a good chance that they're planning something a little more substantial. I'm alluding to like some sort of new Switch hardware. Now, are we actually getting new Switch hardware soon? That's a tough question. We are getting later and later into the Switch's life cycle. If Breath of the Wild 2 does come out next March, that's going to be the 6-year anniversary. Typically, Nintendo generations, by the 6th year mark, we get a new system. They oftentimes are only 4 or 5 years long. 4 is on the short side, 5 is sort of more standard. But it does depend. Like sometimes when they're super successful, they do go longer, right? Like the Wii, it released in 2006, and we didn't see the Wii U come out until 2012. So they waited 6 years for that generation. And the Wii, but the other interesting thing about the Wii is that those last couple years were bad. So I would say that looking at how well Switch is doing, it's not a Wii situation. But I also think Nintendo wants to avoid that scenario where they don't have a lot of content ready for a system and they want to have a more seamless transition. So just because there's not a lot of games coming out, I don't think that means there's not like a new generation around the corner. So it's tough. It's tough to say if we're gonna get like a new piece of Switch hardware or Switch 2 or Switch Plus Pro, whatever, in March, or if we're just gonna get like a cool Breath of the Wild 2 themed OLED. I'm gonna say I do believe there will be some sort of hardware that will release that will have some sort of Breath of the Wild goodness on it. Either a controller, a themed OLED, or a full-on new Switch hardware. The thing about OLED is that it's not really that much of an improved experience. Like, it doesn't really improve the experience for Breath of the Wild 2 beyond handheld mode. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it might look really cool, but it doesn't improve the experience. At least with Splatoon 3, it has that built-in Ethernet cable connection. So, like, it's easier for people right out of the box to get a more stable, better internet connection with that. So you could argue, I mean, it's maybe not like the biggest feature that they market, but technically, you know, it does facilitate a better Splatoon experience. When the initial OLED came out alongside Metroid Dread, a game that a lot of people would enjoy playing in handheld mode, getting out that OLED to show off better visuals in handheld mode really fits. Now, you know, Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be probably a looker, and you could simply say, well, you know, being able to play Breath of the Wild 2 in handheld mode and it looking great on an OLED makes sense. And, you know, it could be as simple as that. But I really do feel like Nintendo likes to use Zelda specifically to really, like, showcase new hardware. not just a themed edition. And we're so close to when that new hardware could be coming out. Yeah, it's kind of debate. It's really tough. It's a tough call. So yeah, I'm not sure. I wish I could give you a more solid answer. I'm leaning less. I would say we're less likely to get an OLED than not. Now that not includes the possibility of us getting like a controller instead, or maybe a Switch hardware. I don't know. I mean, like, it's really tough. It's really tough. It can go either way for me. Okay, I'll tell you this. If there's not new hardware coming out alongside Breath of the Wild 2, there will be an OLED themed Switch. How about that? I think that makes sense, right? Like that. Like, it would be weird for Nintendo to not have some sort of themed Zelda bundle if there's not new hardware. It would be strange. So that's what I'll say. If there's no new hardware coming alongside the release for Breath of the Wild 2, they will have a Zelda themed Switch, when they probably would showcase the OLED, because that's kind of like the the premier system right now. So I'll stick with that. Moving on here. Joy CJ. My boss knows I'm taking a random week off next year specifically to play Breath of the Wild 2. Good. Yeah, that is a great idea. Maybe I should do that. I don't know. Vacation days might be a little limited. Maybe at least a couple days though, right? Upper Nimbus, hello there. How are you? D771. Breath of the Wild 2 to be delayed until holiday 2023, so it gives them time to release the 2 ports later this year. I think that they could release the ports August or September this year and still market Breath of the Wild 2 starting September. Like, that's fine. But that will require they announce the port soon. I think it'll get weird. I do think there is a window where it becomes a little weird. And I think we're getting close to that, which is why I put out the video recently asking if it's too late. Because I don't think it's too late yet for Twilight Princess Wind Waker HD, assuming Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out in March. It's not too late yet, in my opinion. Because I think they could have a 4 to 6 month window before they release. But we're cutting it close. And I don't see them coming out in October. They already have 2 big published games coming out in October, along with a slew of third-party stuff. I don't see them having that as like a big holiday release, because if they're ports of games that have already been remastered. That's a few degrees of separation already. I think they're going to provide something more new than that for their holiday release. So, I don't see them coming out in October and November. And I think December is probably too late into the year. But I would say December is more likely in October and November, simply because in general, we see smaller releases at that time. There are exceptions. Look at Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But again, usually smaller releases. So maybe. But, we've seen games. We've seen situations where, for example, Four Swords came out 4 months before with a Wind Waker back on the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. Something like that can happen, and I think Twilight Princess Wind Waker coming out 4 to 6 months before Breath of the Wild 2 would be a similar situation. I think that is doable, but we're running out of time. Like, I would say, if we don't see them announced, I don't know. Like, could we have like an early September Nintendo Direct, and then they announce them then, and they come out like, say, December, and Breath of the Wild 2 comes out in March? Yeah, actually, I could see that. That could happen. I think that's the latest. I think the latest we can see those Zelda remasters get announced is September for a December release. I think if you go into January, that's too close to Breath of the Wild 2. It's too close. But also, to play devil's advocate, we did see another interesting situation where Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl came out in November, and Legends Arceus came out January, and that did not impact sales for the games at all. They both performed tremendously well. I think people would love to play Wind Waker or Twilight Princess December or January, and would probably still buy Breath of the Wild 2 in March. So, you know, maybe we're putting too much stock into this idea of them coming out too soon before each other. Another interesting consideration, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe came out in a January, and then this is 2019, and then Mario Maker came out, I want to say May or June of that same year. So just like 5 months later, they had another Mario game that was about 2D Mario level, gameplay right next to each other. So I think we may very well be putting too much stock in the difference, but I would venture to guess that it would be closer to 6 months than 1 month, you know? So there's definitely going to be somewhat of a gap there. I would say if it's going to happen, it's going to happen this calendar year most likely. And the only options really are, in my opinion, are August, September, or December, not October or November. And August is becoming pretty unlikely because August starts next week, and they haven't been announced yet. Like we saw that 3D All Stars is announced 2 weeks before its release, and I would say there's a similarity between these compilation packages that they were both rumored for so long, they were so clamored for, they're old games. Like there's a similarity there, but I don't think you assume a 2-week announcement to release window, right? I think that's an anomaly, an aberration. But I also think it could have a short, window from announcement to release, like maybe a month. So if they announce it in August, it could come out in September. So 2 and 3 comes out early September. So what does Nintendo have for late September? Because for the rest of September, there's nothing in terms of like first party Nintendo stuff. There's not much for the first half of October either. So I think some Zelda remasters would actually fit pretty well towards the late September window. Or if not that, maybe another Nintendo game. So just take that into consideration there. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. Definitely tricky. Hakan, I think the Summer Direct didn't happen because Breath of the Wild 2 got delayed. It's an interesting point. I'm going to touch on that. Hakan, I'm gonna Matt, we're gonna get to your question about Zippo and the Kid Icarus rumor in a moment. I think when it comes to the idea that Nintendo may have delayed the Direct because Breath of the Wild 2 got delayed, I think that could be a consideration, right? I think, odds are there wasn't one single reason why we didn't get it, and I think that could be a contributing factor. I think when Nintendo announced that Breath of the Wild 2 was getting pushed to spring 2023, I think maybe they were planning potentially like a big sort of like Zelda presentation, because typically that's when the big Zelda games get sort of showcased at E3, and they weren't ready for that, so they pushed it up, and that makes sense. Not having the big Zelda, they maybe decided to like showcase things a little differently. And maybe that's why we're getting the Metroid Prime remake in November specifically, because, it's a pretty cool game, but at the end of the day, it's a remake. It's not as hard to get out there. And it's one of those things that may have been ready for a little while already, and they were sort of waiting for when they could push that, because it's something that could sort of fit like that holiday sort of Nintendo game release. But, it's not quite, it's obviously not no Breath of the Wild 2, but it is something that can kind of help to fill that void. So yeah, I think that there definitely, that could have something to do with it, Hakan. That maybe in part Breath of the Wild 2 getting delayed had something to do with that, because they wanted to have a big Zelda showcase there. But when that fell through, they had to sort of piece things together in a different way, and maybe they also decided maybe we should just experiment with how we showcase this stuff. That could have something to do with it, for sure. Maverick, sup Andre, what do you think of the Kid Icarus Uprising remaster rumor by Zippo? So I heard about it, I haven't seen him, I haven't read it yet, right? Now, I'll tell you, without even, I heard about the rumor, you can just check my channel, okay? You can check my channel, I made a video about it, when we got the news that Bandai Namco is working on some sort of remake or remaster of an action game from Nintendo, my first thought was Kid Icarus Uprising, and it's the one I think that makes the more sense than any other. There aren't too many Nintendo games that would benefit from a remaster or remake more than Kid Icarus Uprising, that would also be successful, I think, and would kind of fit what Bandai Namco would do. Like, Bandai Namco has worked with Sakurai before. They have an understanding of what Sakurai games are, given they've worked on a couple of Smash Bros. Games, and Kid Icarus Uprising is a Sakurai game. And, it makes sense from an online gameplay perspective as well. Kid Icarus Uprising had a big portion to that. I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons. And it's my prediction that Bandai Namco is working on Kid Icarus Uprising, a remake of it, or a remaster. But I'm not the only person who thought of that. Yes, it was my idea. I was one of the first people to think about it. It is what I think makes the most sense, but I'm fully acknowledging there's a number of other games that technically would also fit that Nintendo could do. But on that note, if someone says, hey, this game is happening, there's a rumor for it, it could just be a prediction being masked as a leak. And I'll tell you that Zippo's had a shaky record. So I'm not convinced Zippo is a legitimate leaker. I'm not saying they aren't, because they have gotten some things right, but also a lot of the things they said have been talked about by other people. So I don't know. I don't really buy it. I'm not convinced. But let's go ahead and look this up. I want to read what they said specifically. Maybe there's some more information there. Zippo Kid Icarus. Let's see what comes up. I think they also mentioned something about Star Fox recently, which I also didn't really cover, because just being forthcoming here, I don't trust Zippo too much anymore. I never really trusted him full-heartedly, but now it's even less so. Let's see here. All right. The report from Zippo claims that the new Switch version of Kid Icarus Uprising is being developed by Bandai Namco and will launch at an undetermined window in 2023. The game is also said to be getting a much more accessible control scheme, obviously, for Switch, which isn't a surprise given that many of the controls in the original game were tied to the 3DS and its touchscreen. For the most part, Kid Icarus Uprising is an incredibly well-received game. Yeah, we know. Yeah. This is mostly just speculation by the article. I want to see the source. Where's the source? What is it with no one giving sources? Like, okay, here it is. Alright, I got the source. Let me screen share. Let's see here. Alright. So I think this is Zippo's blog. He sometimes talks about leaks and stuff. Pit flies again. Kid Icarus Uprising is getting a remaster. Sorry to keep you waiting. I told you to have more scoops. This one is a big one. Kid Icarus Uprising is absolutely one of my favorite games of all time. The gameplay, story, voice acting, and excellent soundtrack has remained a part of me since I first played it a decade ago, and I've replayed it many times since then. I treasure this game dearly. Well, he has great taste, I'll say that. You'll be happy to hear that a full remaster of the game is in development at Bandai Namco. There will be a new, much more accessible control scheme, and the visuals are getting a much needed boost. Like, again, these are all things that I predicted would happen because it just makes sense. It's just what makes sense based on what we know so far of what the Bandai Namco is doing. There is one snag, however. The game's multiplayer mode will return, but will reportedly be running in Bamco's legendarily awful netcode. If you played any of Bamco's games online before, Smash, Fighters, Tekken 7, you'll know how disappointing this piece of news is. Here's hoping that aspect changes before release. Regardless, that's yet another beloved long-awaited Nintendo game coming to Switch. I for one could not be more excited. The remaster is due for release sometime next year. So, I mean, if Bandai Namco is working on the game, like, I guess, yeah, it doesn't shock me that they would do that. You know, I would love it for them to take advantage of Nintendo's new online servers. I would prefer that. You know, we look at how good Monster Hunter Rise plays online. So I would prefer that, but you know, oh well. If that's happened, like, I'll still be happy about it. I will say I don't really like playing Smash or Dragon Ball Fighters online, but I think part of that just has to do with the fact that I don't like playing fighting games online. Although maybe the reason I don't like playing fighting games online is because the fighting games I play are made by Bandai Namco. It's a catch 2022 there. Is it, do I not like playing fighting games online? Or do I not like playing fighting games online because Bandai Namco ruins the online? That's a tough call. Yeah, I don't know. Alright, let's stop sharing this for now. Where do I get back to myself? There we go. Alright. So, it's one of those things where, like, I can't say with a lot of certainty if this rumor is true, but it is something that I like. I hope it's true, and I'm not convinced that Zippo doesn't have legitimate information, but I'm also not convinced that Zippo does either. But as I told you before, when we got this is real information. Bandai Namco working on some sort of remaster remake of a Nintendo action game is factual information that we do know about because we saw hirings for that particular project. Like, that is legitimate information that is 100% public and real and official. But the question is, what are they working on? If it's actually a Nintendo game, a remaster of an old Nintendo action game, I think the one that makes the most sense is Kid Icarus Uprising. For all the reasons I stated. So, you know, I think that I hope that maybe you could look at this Zippo rumor and maybe think that makes it more credible. But you could simply also argue that Zippo jumped to similar conclusions, and assuming they're not a real leaker and they're just putting out predictions, and they're predicting this and they're hoping to get it right because it makes sense. It does make sense. So we'll see. You know, this I'll say this though. If Zippo is a legitimate leaker and they're getting this because that's just like their inside no, but then I got it just because I thought it made sense, like, from a prediction, I'll feel pretty good about getting that prediction right. That's all I'm saying. Like, I would love to be right about that, but you know, we'll see what happens because there's so many possibilities. Yeah, I can't really tell you for sure if it's happening or not. Yeah. Hakan, Zippo is Samus Hunter Marco Maro tier. Maybe. Yeah, I do agree that Jeff Grubb, Nathan Hayden, and Emily Rogers are different, are on another level compared to Zippo, Samus Hunter, Marco Maro. I would say Zippo, Samus Hunter, Marco Maro, there's a history of them saying things, some of those things being true and some of those things being not. A lot. They put out more. Those leakers put out more information than Grubb, Nathan Haight, or Emily Rogers. And it seems that they do it for the following. Well, not so much Zippo, but Samus Hunter and Marco Maro do it for the following on Twitter. So there is that to consider. Emily Rogers and Jeff Grubb are journalists. It's different. It's very different. They don't always get everything right either, but usually if they get something wrong, it's more of a timing issue, not a reality issue. You know, no one's been 100% right, but there's definitely Jeff Grubb, Nate DeHay, and Emily Rogers are far more right than wrong. And those other leakers are hit or miss at best, and you could argue that what they get right is simply what most people believe in, because it's just kind of smart speculation, predictions, or taking information from legitimate insiders like the ones we just mentioned. So, you know, it's a tough call. Moving on here. Let's see. I think, I don't know if that changes the audio. Maybe it does. Sorry. Hakan added me. Every single September Direct in the Switch era has been exactly 1 week before the Tokyo Game Show. Tokyo Game Show is September 15th this year, so September 8th is likely. I would love to double check if that's true. It's an interesting fact. I mean, it doesn't seem too much of a stretch. So, you know what? I'm not going to take too much time to look into that, right? But that's an interesting observation. Let's look at the Tokyo Game Show 2021. When did that happen? Tokyo Game Show was the end of September last year? Tokyo Game Show takes place Wednesday, September 29th through Sunday, October 3rd. So the end of September, early October. And then the September Direct last year happened when? September 23rd. So, okay, I mean, it's not too far off. It's about a week from the beginning of the show. So, you know, I'm not going to take the time to look at every single year, but I don't know if that's something Nintendo does intentionally or it's just coincidental. But I do believe there will be a Direct in September, because they always have a Direct in September. And I really doubt we won't get another major Direct this year. After skipping E3, it's like more reason for there to be a Direct in September. Super Luigi Kong, I really think Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be delayed to holiday 2023, and Nintendo will spend most of E3 talking about the game. Huh, maybe. Alright, I'm going to take a break from the live chat here and check a few other questions I got beforehand on my community page when I shared it out there briefly. There's not too many questions there, so let's see. Okay. Alright, Kieran Buckley had a few questions too. So here we go. Related to 2023. 1. What are your early expectations for Nintendo's 2023? Awesome. So it's a great question, I think, because we don't really know what Nintendo's doing for their 2023 yet, right? Now, I think Breath of the Wild 2 probably is it probably is a March release. Like, I think that's gonna be their big release for March. But typically we'll see at least one game in between January and February. At least one game. So I'll say that at least one game is the recently rumored Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. We saw an online listing not too long ago that was placing it in February. I could see it coming out then. It's quite a delay from its initial release, but looking at how stacked this year is, I can see it easily being slipping up all the way to then. Could they squeeze it into this year, maybe December, or announce it really soon for like a September release? Those are options as well. But, you know, based off the information we have, I could definitely see it coming out February. I don't think we'll see, like, say for example, the rumored F-Zero, or like a new Star Fox or Kid Icarus coming out in January. I don't see that. I think Advance Wars makes sense for them. But on the note of some of those games, F-Zero is being legitimately rumored now. So let's talk about that briefly, and I'll kind of tying it into your question, Kieran. So, you know, I put out a video on this, so if you want more details on the full situation, you know, check out that video. But there's a new leaker in town, and this one has a pretty good track record going by the name of Silex Hunter. If you check their Twitter, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of like deleting information or anything of that sort. There's a very sort of consistent identity and sort of objective of this social media. They are posing as actually Silex on Twitter, presenting a antagonistic attitude towards Samus Hunter, another leaker that they believe to be fake and has been fairly inconsistent over the last couple of years, and other leakers as well that don't have a good track record, like Zippo, like Marco Maro. I don't think they've spoken ill of Zippo necessarily. So, you know, I do think Zippo is a bit more of a question mark compared to those other two. So, you know, but still. Anyways, Silex Hunter, not to confuse with Samus Hunter, Silex Hunter has said some things and has been 100% spot on with them. So recently they gained a lot of popularity because they said that Bayonetta 3 would be announced, well, its release date would be announced on a such and such date, and it'd be coming out on October 28th. Like they said when, they actually told us when we'd be getting the trailer, announcing the release date, and they were right about when we would get the trailer, and they were right about when we would get the release date. That was 100% true. And this little information they gave us is on the heels of information that not people noticed at the time because they didn't have a big following, but they also said there would be a partner direct. They said exactly when it would happen, and they said what games would be there. Now, in fairness, everything that this person said about the partner direct, I also predicted. I'm not the only person. I'm trying to say that I'm like some great Nostradamus. A lot of people felt similar to me. Like, a lot of people thought that the 29th, even though Charlotte Nazar, Alana Pierce had said till 29th, that it didn't really make sense. You know, I thought maybe there's some time zone conflicts there and things of that nature. So I was saying probably the 28th, and that's when it happened. And this conversation of Mario Rabbids being there, of Nier Automata, the Persona games, all of this was sort of discussed a few days beforehand. So I think, yeah, we're all like, that's not like a crazy thing, but when you consider they were spot on about it, and they're spot on about the Bayonetta thing, then you're like, oh, that's pretty good. But also, if you go back earlier into their Twitter, before they really had any sort of following at all, like no one was really paying attention to them. Like, yeah, like we're talking about like 3 or 4 people they were paying attention to this person. Like, it was a small amount. They said that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was going to be getting DLC, and that it would not be getting there would not be a Mario Kart 10, but there would be DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe instead, which I think is a very weird thing that Nintendo has done that was very hard to predict, but they decided to do. And all the rumors are pointing towards a Mario Kart 10 at the time. We even had industry analysts saying that Mario Kart 10 would be coming out. So Mario Kart 10, whatever the next Mario Kart is, right? But anyways, like there was rumors, there was industry analysts. It just kind of makes sense logically that after so many years they've been working on Mario Kart 10, and then no, Nintendo announced Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC, a game that's been out since 2014. So, person is showing to be a pretty strong track record, and recently they were on Switch Force, and they interviewed about a number of things, and they maybe teased Metroid Prime remake. Basically, they just said that they trust Jeff Grubb, and you know, a lot of people do. I do as well. But also, they were asked to put out a cryptic message for us to dissect, and so they put like a zeros and ones binary code. People, you know, you just have to put that in a translator, and it translates to, what is it, like 25, like 7, 16, there's 4 different numbers. Like, yeah, I think it was 25, 7, 2, 16. Those are the numbers. And people couldn't figure it out. I tried to figure it out, couldn't. But then if you followed Silex Hunter, he had a thread sort of announcing, talking about this, and in there was a thread, and this person by the name of Bozo the Chozo, which is the funny, like, just funny how there's these different Metroid characters on Twitter, and the person put out, "You got boost power, F-Zero," and Silex Hunter said, "You are correct. You got boost power, as in YGP. Y being the 25th letter, G I think is the 7th letter. Like, I'm just kind of trying to remember this off the top of my head. 2 being B, boost, and then P being 16, I guess, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. But that's the point, that the numbers were associated with letters of the alphabet, which was an acronym for "You got boost power," a famous phrase from F-Zero. Silex Hunter confirmed this in a Twitter thread, and basically, yes, F-Zero is being teased by this person who seemingly has a pretty solid, clean, 100% accurate track record of what's going on. So I'm all in on the F-Zero hype train. It's happening. Anyways, so that's what was sort of discussed with F-Zero. I don't think F-Zero's coming out this year, but could I see F-Zero coming out sometime next year? Yeah. I could see F-Zero getting announced in a September Nintendo Direct and be coming out, say, like May or June. Kind of like Nintendo Switch Sports this April, or like Mario Strikers this June. Like a big game, or maybe not like a big game, but a game that comes out, has sort of like an online multiplayer component, and it's similar to those games. Like that's kind of what it is. It'll be coming out in the spring, summertime. It kind of fits that sort of window, that sort of type of game Nintendo comes out with around that time. And yeah, I would love to see that. It was super exciting. So, let's assume all this is the case, right? We're looking at a lineup of maybe Advance Wars in February, Breath of the Wild 2 in March, and maybe F-Zero in May or June or something like that. That's an interesting beginning to next year, right? Let's also point out that there still will be DLC coming out for the Mario Kart. So that DLC also will be coming out maybe around February as well, or March. Also, let's point out that the Mario movie is expected to come out in the first half of 2023 as well. So there's going to be some publicity for that movie. Will there be a Mario game that comes out around the release of the movie? If so, I would say it would be a 2D Mario game, not a 3D Mario game. I think Nintendo would save a 3D Mario for the holidays. So, and potentially new hardware at this point. So, not saying 3D Mario won't be announced sometime next year. It could even come out the end of next year. But I don't think it's going to come out before the movie. But I could see Nintendo announcing a 2D Mario, say the September Direct, and it comes out sometime in the first half of next year. So, you want an idea of what I'm sort of thinking for next year. Breath of the Wild 2, Advance Wars, maybe F-Zero, maybe a Mario game. The F-Zero and the Mario game are a little bit more speculative. I think the Mario one is the kind of like the loftiest one of all of those. Breath of the Wild 2 for sure, and I think Advance Wars at this point. That's what I sort of see happening. And then, DLC for both Xenoblade 3, Splatoon probably still be getting DLC coverage around that time, and also Mario Kart. So those things I think will be around then. Now Donkey Kong has to come out at some point too. So that, and then also Pikmin. So those are also candidates to be announced relatively soon. I don't know if I expect them this year per se, but I think if there's a good chance neither of them comes out this year, but there's a small chance maybe one of them squeezes in. But there's a really good chance at least one of them comes out next year, and I think there's a really, really good chance that both of them are at least talked about next year. So, those are other considerations for the first half of 2023. Now, for your second question, Karen, do you think 2023 could be a slower year compared to the last two being very strong years? Well, as I just sort of stated, we kind of have like a number of things that can maybe happen. If you believe the F-Zero rumor, there's that. Donkey Kong's technically rumored. I mean, I think some of you know that I was one of the people who reported on Donkey Kong. I'm not saying it was the first person, but I had my own personal inside information on it. I'm not saying I'm an insider. Just some people I trust told me. That's it. So I think the Donkey Kong thing, like, you know, that's a strong candidate for next year. So you look at F-Zero, you look at Donkey Kong, you have the Kid Icarus thing. I don't know if I don't know. Let me be clear. I'm not saying I believe the Zippo rumor, but I will say Zippo is. I don't place Zippo in the same territory as Samus Hunter or Marco Maro, but I also don't place Zippo in the same territory as Emily Rogers or Jeff Grubb. Like, I would say Zippo. I would put Zippo maybe closer to Samus Hunter, Marco Maro, but like not right there. Like, it's somewhere in between those. So, you know, I'm not convinced that Zippo is a fake leaker, but I'm also not, like I said earlier, it could go either way. But anyways, my point from when I was talking about the Kid Icarus thing is just that it makes sense for Kid Icarus. And even if it's not Kid Icarus, Bandai Namco is working on some sort of Nintendo action game. They are remastering that. And given that it's a remaster, it doesn't take like that long to make. It could be announced next year. It could be something for 2024 just as much too, but that could also be in the cards is my main point here. Now, another thing I'll point out is that just because we heard about hirings this year doesn't mean they just started hiring. That just could be just a little bit of extra support to close things out. They could have been working on it for the last couple of years already. So there's a number of things. There's Pikmin, Donkey Kong, Star Fox is apparently rumored as well. I don't know about that one. But yeah, the Bandai Namco remaster, now apparently F-Zero. I think Mario something is in the works. Maybe 2 different Mario games, both 2D and 3D. Obviously Breath of the Wild 2. DLC for Xenoblade. DLC for Splatoon. DLC for Mario Kart. Metroid Prime 4. Metroid Prime 2 and 3 as well. If Wind Waker and Twilight Princess don't come out this year, those are still things that come out next year. Well, probably not next year, but you know, eventually. And there's also 2D Zelda, for example. So there's still a lot. Also, what about the next Fire Emblem? That's supposedly not too far off either, like an actual Fire Emblem. And then also Astral Chain 2. I wouldn't be shocked if Platinum Games is also well into development for Astral Chain 2. And then also, what is Next Level Games working on? Well, they just came out with Mario Strikers, so that we got a ways off before that one. So it really is an astounding amount of games Nintendo could still be sitting on and getting ready. So I don't think that 2023 is necessarily going to be a slower year. I mean, just for the simple fact, let's say nothing else, Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out next year. Breath of the Wild 2, in my opinion, is a bigger, more hype game than anything that's come out this year, last year. Pretty much, I mean, Breath of the Wild, to me, is the biggest, most important game for Switch. So a sequel to that's been in development for way too long. I mean, like, and I assume that's mostly to make it bigger and better, not because there's development issues. Given that it's a sequel and there's already a foundation in place, this is going to be a big deal. So Breath of the Wild 2 alone gives 2023 a huge advantage compared to most other years. So just because we don't know that much yet, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I might even argue that 2023 could be a bigger year than this year or last year, because there's a really good chance we see new hardware next year. And if there's new hardware next year, then Nintendo's going to want to push that new hardware with really strong software. I think what we're looking at right now, last year and this year, it isn't so much that Nintendo is putting out the best of what they have. Quite the contrary. I think we haven't seen necessarily Nintendo's biggest, best projects. Now, I mean, you know, Bayonetta 3, Splatoon 3, Xenoblade 3, a lot of 3s there. These are big games. These are, like, you know, they're games made by quality developers that have been in development for a long time. I think we are getting around to some of those big games that have been in the works for a few years, like the ones mentioned. But there's still more. What is the Mario Kart team working on? What is the Mario team working on? We know what the Zelda team's working on. That's coming out next year. So there's some big stuff around the corner. A lot of the rumored, speculated things I mentioned. I think Nintendo is just at a point where we're just seeing quality, consistent releases across the board. I think that's just the nature of the beast is. Well, could there be a dry spell coming? I'm sure at some point there may be a little bit of a dry spell. I think 2017, I think Nintendo front-loaded the Switch's lineup, so 2018 felt a little sparse by comparison. But then 2019 till now has been pretty consistent. Now 2020 is that sort of that exception year because, I mean, the pandemic. But even then it had some decent stuff littered throughout. So, yeah, I don't think 2023 is going to be slow compared to these last 2 years. It might be on par. It might not be like way better. It might be about on par, right? Maybe Breath of the Wild 2 sort of like front loads things a little bit, and there won't be as many hype things that come out in the second half. But I mean, if 3D Mario, Metroid Prime 4, and Pokemon DLC come out in the second half alongside things I suggested for the first half, I mean, come on. That's probably going to be, maybe people may even argue it's like the best year of Switch. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be slower. Worst case scenario, it's going to be comparable. There's a good chance it could be better. All right, Arcean has some questions for me, so here we go. Arcean has 3 questions. Okay. Do you think that Nintendo will support the current Switch with mostly smaller titles once their next generation is released, or that they will release their bigger AAA first-party titles on both generations for a while afterwards? Yeah, I mean, I understand the consideration on both sides, right? Because the former, smaller titles on Switch, while the bigger stuff on the new Switch or Switch 2 sort of seems similar to how they handled 3DS and Switch, right? So that's something to be considered. But I think we're looking at a situation where Nintendo's already developing their games with scalability in mind. They're already developing their game oftentimes with their games with variable resolution. I mean, they have to develop their games with at least 2 sort of spec sets in mind because there's handheld mode and docked mode. I think Nintendo, from a development perspective, has been positioning themselves in a way where they can have different types of hardware that are different specs, and their games can run on these different spec sets, right? These different like spec ranges. So I think the future and the more modern way about going about things, especially when you look at how Sony and Microsoft are doing things, and if you just look at how the PC community has been for years, games just are made and they run on different spec sets. And I think Nintendo is moving in that direction as well. As I said, the Switch is literally that already because it has to be 2 for every game. So I think that's the direction Nintendo's going in. I think the Switch is doing so well. I think Nintendo is going to try and be more cautious than ever before in having a proper transition. Because I think they're going to maintain the Switch brand. Ride the coattails, if you will. But in a not so much ride the coattails, because I think the Switch 2 is going to be just as good as the Switch 1. It's going to be just an improvement of it. And they're going to try and just kind of have it be a seamless transition. Think how maybe how Sony does things. Now, my dream scenario is just whatever the Switch 2 is, you can take cartridges for the Switch and you just put them in Switch 2 and it's the same. Like, there isn't going to be like it's all going to be just Nintendo Switch. And let's say Breath of the Wild 2, you take that cartridge, you put it in your Switch, it's awesome. But you put it in your Switch 2 and it's 4K awesome with 60 frames per second, but it's the same cartridge. Like, that's sort of like my dream scenario. Is it possible they just release the game twice on both platforms? That I'm not sure on. But I do think I'm not sure how they're going to sort of, I guess, put out these games in retail or digitally, how they're going to distribute the games. But I do think that they're going to be focused on having the same type of games coming out on both platforms, at least initially. And that's going to be similar to more of a Sony Microsoft transition as opposed to a 3DS Switch transition. Question 2. Which title do you think would be more likely for Nintendo to save for the next generation? The next 3D Mario or the rumored new Donkey Kong game? So I'll just tell you straight up, the most likely is 3D Mario. Donkey Kong, that needs to come out on Switch. Or it needs to come out on Switch 2 when it has an established audience. Donkey Kong right now, is in a position where Nintendo needs to revitalize it, similar to Metroid. So I do think Donkey Kong coming out on base Switch. 3D Mario, on the other hand, similar to Zelda, has a history of coming out early on for a platform and being something that pushes that platform. Donkey Kong historically doesn't do that. Not saying it doesn't have that potential, but I think you need to re-establish the brand first of Donkey Kong. So, you know, when Donkey Kong was at its best was when it came out late into the Super Nintendo generation. So, to my point, when Donkey Kong was at its best, it wasn't like it didn't open up a system generation, right? You could argue, oh well, what about Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze and Return? So still, those games didn't come out necessarily early in their respective generations either. So, you know, there's that. And the same thing with Donkey Kong 64. Donkey Kong hasn't been used for that. So I don't think they're going to start now. I think they need to focus on rebuilding or revitalizing the Donkey Kong series on an established platform like the Switch. 3D Mario, on the other hand, there's a history of them using that to push new hardware or having it come out early on in generations. Typically, we usually see a single big 3D Mario per platform. There are exceptions. The most recent exception being Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, but it was a straight up sequel. I think we're past the point of seeing a straight up sequel for Odyssey, so we're just going to see the next 3D Mario installment on Switch 2. And then your third question, what will be your most hype announcement for 2023? Well, that's tough. There's a lot of things that could conceivably get announced then, right? F-Zero, that could be huge. That could be huge. I would be stoked. Could Icarus, I would be huge. I would be stoked. I'd be in love with both. Metroid Prime 4 confirmed for next year. That's also a possibility. I'm not saying it's a for sure thing, but it's a possibility. Holiday 2023, that would be huge. 3D Mario, that could conceivably come out next year. That could be like I would 3D Mario, like all of these things I love, I adore so much. Like I want to believe all these games are coming out next year because it would be the year of Andres. Like I don't know. Well, I mean even this year's good. Splatoon, Xenoblade, like it's been a good year. So what would be my most hype announcement? All of those would be hype for me. I mean, we're getting Breath of the Wild too. So a confirmation of like Breath of the Wild, you know, more news on Breath of the Wild 2 is going to make me happy. All those things would make me hype. Like is there going to be, but I guess the question is, let's say we're watching a direct and I'm streaming it, right? And I have a reaction, like an actual like reaction. What would like freak me out the most? Like in the moment, if I were to see it, how would I act? And I don't know. I haven't had those in a while because, you know, I don't know. Like life has kind of not facilitated too many direct reactions. Also, we haven't had an E3, so you know, there's that too. When they showed off Breath of the Wild 2 for the first time, or teased it for the first time in 2019, I lost my voice. So I think, while it may be somewhat disappointing, I think, I don't know, because it's already been somewhat announced. It's a tough question, Arcean. I might cry when they reveal F-Zero, though. Yeah. Like, we see F-Zero announced for 2023, and it looks amazing. I might rip my shirt off and scream and cry at the same time. Like, it would just because Mario is expected, Metroid is expected, Zelda is expected. Now, I don't know when we're getting them exactly, but I know all of those are coming within the next couple years, probably. F-Zero, on the other hand, we've been waiting basically 2 decades for that, so it's just a different beast, and F-Zero is my favorite racing franchise. So I guess my personal most hype announcement, let's say in the September Direct, they announced F-Zero for 2023. It's a brand new, ground up, new F-Zero. It looks gorgeous. It's super fast. The music is just blitzing, maddening, insanely cool. It's this futuristic space flying G diffuser bouncer high speed. Amazingness. Like, yeah, I would flip emotionally. It would be, yeah. So I'll say F-Zero. That's my pick. All right, Nintendo. Other than Metroid Prime 4 and possibly the Metroid Prime remaster that is supposedly complete, rumored to have also been made by Retro Studios, right? What other projects do you think Retro Studios could be working on now, if any, or even possibly in the future? Well, there is Metroid Prime 2 and 3 as well, getting remastered. I don't know if they're working on anything else right now. Like, I think that is their focus. I don't think they're that big of a studio right now to be working on anything else. Now, I know we've talked about in the past how maybe they're working on like Nintendo Land 2 or something, because there was like that weird character in the piece of art that was for Reggie Fils-Aimé, and he showed it off and he hit it with a Mario statue, and I looked at it, and in my opinion the only character that it could really match in Nintendo history was Monita. And Monita is the sort of host in Nintendo Land. So my speculation was, okay, Retro Studios is doing something with Nintendo Land 2. Could they be working on that? I'm going to say no. At this point, I think it's just been canceled. But, you know, Nintendo has been known to sit on things for a long time. It could be something that maybe they put to the side and they come back to it. So, you know, who knows? Maybe we see Metroid Prime remake come out this year. Prime 4 comes out the year after, and we know that they basically become the dedicated Metroid studio, but they are being built upon. Maybe they still can have like side projects as well, and maybe they do revitalize this project that I thought they were working on, but you know, no real compelling evidence besides a piece of art that maybe looked like Monita that we couldn't see because it was hidden behind a Mario statue. Like, yeah, like maybe that's what they're doing, you know. I would love to see them do that. I'll say that Retro Studios, we don't know why they've been so quiet for so long, not entirely. But you have to think they've been working on multiple projects, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to come to fruition. You have to think that Retro Studios have been going through a lot of changes internally, and they haven't really been positioned in a way to get a lot done. But I think now Nintendo has been helping them to build up, because they are a Nintendo One studio, and they've been focusing, and they're trying to do some great things right now. So I think right now the focus is Metroid. They're just doing everything they can for Metroid, building up for Metroid, and I think they're going to be. I'm thinking they're going to do a great job, hit it out of the park, and they're going to become like a dedicated Metroid developer. But as they grow and expand, they will also be able to do some other side games as well. Maybe a Star Fox, maybe a Nintendo Land 2, maybe a new IP someday. We'll see. The Speed Forever. Are you going to stream Xenoblade Chronicles 3, or are you playing it offline just to enjoy it? Also, love your videos. Thank you. I'm glad you love my videos. That's very much appreciated. Thank you for saying that. I don't plan on streaming Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and that's purely because I just don't stream games on the channel anymore. You know, time is very, as I've mentioned probably 12 times during this stream, it's just very limited for me, right? You know, I do my best. I only have so much time to invest, and when I used to stream, you know, maybe if the setup could have been better, and I was a bit of a smaller content creator at the time. Still a small, I mean, it's all relative, right? Still small, but it's all relative. The point is, I didn't have as active as a following, so I could have streams where I wouldn't have many people watching. There wouldn't be that much interaction in the chat, and I'd just be kind of just playing there for hours, but in an uncomfortable way. Like, I don't enjoy necessarily sitting down in a chair playing. I like to kind of like sit down on a couch or like curl up in bed or something and play a game. I don't like sitting on a chair and have like lights on and a camera on me and being sort of worried about how I look and present. And I kind of did it to, if you can't tell, I've given up on how well I look and present myself on stream to some extent, not entirely, but to some extent. I don't care as much, but still, like, that it takes away from the experience for me, right? Because there's too much to focus on. Because, you know, I try to entertain, right? Like, I consider myself an entertainer, and if I'm streaming a game, I feel compelled to talk the entire time, and that gets tiring. I enjoy talking, but this is tiring. This is tiring. I can't do this forever, especially by myself, right? Speaking of which, we've been doing this for almost 2 hours, so, you know, I can't go on forever here, but my goal is to get to most of the questions that were asked beforehand and catch up in the chat. So we're getting there, but, you know, I'm not giving up. Anyways, yeah, so I'm giving you this whole, like, explanation to ultimately say that in general I enjoy playing it, just kind of privately enjoying my games nowadays. But I don't want to say with 100% certainty that I'll never stream a game again. But I try not to do that on the channel, because not only do I not enjoy it as much, but also it's not really the kind of content I do, right? Like I feel like you guys know my content is largely analytical, theoretical, speculative stuff. Like, I'll put out game theories. I might put out like some news videos or like some tips videos, things of that nature. Game streams I don't necessarily do. I guess they're not too much of a stretch, but again, I don't know how successful they'll be for the channel, and then with the time investment, and it sort of takes away from my personal enjoyment of the game. It's just, I don't know if I have enough time to do that, right? Like, I'd rather just focus on enjoying the games myself when I have the time, instead of thinking ahead of time, scheduling it, you know, putting in a block, doing all this preparation. Sometimes I don't really have the time to do that when I also am trying to get out, you know, the Q&A or podcast every Monday night, and I try and do 3 videos a week. Lately it's been 2, but, you know, I try and do 3, so it's kind of like I'm already struggling to output the amount of content I want to output. If I throw streams on top of that, it just becomes increasingly less and less realistic. So probably not going to stream Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but I don't want to say with 100% certainty, because, you know, sometimes on a whim I might, but I just really don't. But we'll see. Just don't expect it. Okay, Mohammed asks, is the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild gonna be delayed again? I don't think so. It's definitely possible, right? I'll say that if we get a September Nintendo Direct, if September comes and goes, and we still haven't gotten news on Breath of the Wild 2 at all, like not even announcing like a Zelda 2 Direct, like if there's no mention of Zelda at all through the month of September, at that point I will start talking about, okay, this game may be getting delayed. Now, it wouldn't mean for sure, but it would. That conversation would start to become more necessary, I would say. I think most likely, though, it's not getting delayed again. And the reason I say that is because, one, the only game we actually know about officially that's coming out next year is Breath of the Wild 2. So, you know, then Nintendo's going to need that for their lineup next year, I would say. But more importantly, they've already given us a slightly more specific release timing. Initially, they said they didn't give us a release timing with the initial reveal in 2019. Then last year's E3, so what at this point, like what, 13 months ago, they said 2022. But they delayed it. But this more recent, when they had the development update, like what, last March or something, they said spring 2023. So they had a more specific timing. I think the more specific timing with the season, that sort of chops it down to about a 3-month window. So given that extra specificity, that to me means that they are locking down on a date now. Like they're locking down on that because they're approaching completion. Not to mention, we did hear earlier this year about the Spanish voice actor for Daruk. doing lines in Breath of the Wild 2. So if they're already getting voice acting done for the game, that also means that they are nearing completion. This is something that's done towards the end of the game. So I would say, I don't have wood here, but knock on this table, fingers crossed, please. Breath of the Wild 2, if it is totally ready to go, may not be delayed. I hope that it comes out on time. It's not delayed, and it's in its full proper glory as everything the developers intended. So yeah, I would say probably not. I think it's not getting delayed, but you also have to take that with a grain of salt because there's a huge history of Zelda games getting delayed, oftentimes more than once. The Zesty Car. You said you think there's a rumor of a Star Fox game in development for Switch. I heard that. I didn't really look into it too much because I didn't see any reputable places talking about it. I think I heard it was coming from Zippo as well. Let's look that up real quick. Again, I've talked about Zippo here. You know, I don't want to come off as someone that's just speaking ill of somebody. They may have legitimate information, but I just don't think they provided enough correct reports for me to like be like, yeah, this is legit, you know. So yeah, let me see if I can find it. Trying to find it. Let's see here. Okay, so it's another blog from Zippo. I'll go ahead and read. I haven't read this yet, so let's take a read at it. Maybe there's some sense there to be made. So let's talk about it. All right. So this is another blog post from Zippo. A new Star Fox game is in development. Hi, that's quite a loaded title to make a return with, isn't it? I'm back. I needed a mental break from the blog being, I don't want to read about his personal stuff, you know. But anyway, so there's been a talk and rumors that have popped up about new revivals of Nintendo properties. I've previously thrown out Golden Sun, and now it's time for another. Oh, Golden Sun. Okay. Listen, I hope Zippo's right about all this stuff, because this stuff is really cool. It's just kind of like the track history, right? Like I talked about Mario Kart 10, and it hasn't really amounted to anything, but we got DLC instead. So it's kind of like, you know, not sure. Anyway, we're returning to the Lilat system. A new Star Fox game has been developed for quite a while. It's been made at an outside studio with the close supervision of Nintendo. The thing is, I haven't yet been able to track down who is developing it. There's a lot of options here. Bandai Namco, The Next Level, Q Games, Koei Tecmo, Ubisoft, and even Forever Entertainment. The only one that's been ruled out to me so far is Platinum, which is a good thing. Frankly, that's still something I'm looking into, so when I have word of who it is, this will be updated. Now, as for what Nintendo considers this new game, a reimagining, a reboot, a sequel, Nintendo's internally trying to toe the line between a sequel and a reboot. It's unknown to my sources how that aspect will shake out. That's so vague. Like, that's pretty much as vague as it gets. Like, just saying, like, that's the best way to say it could be anything. So, to cover all your bases. Like, oh, if it ends up being a straight up remake, there you go. If it ends up being a straight up new game that's just an entirely new installment to the story, I said it would be. Like, yeah. Not to mention, I will also say this. That's pretty much what Star Fox Zero is. That's pretty much what Star Fox 64 is. They're just retreads of the initial Star Fox, but like told in a different way. So, you know, I don't know how much I subscribe to this, but anyway, moving on. There's also going to be an emphasis on an online multiplayer component of some sort. Okay, if a new Star Fox game comes out this day and age, you know, if you look at there was like it makes sense for there to be online multiplayer. The fact that Star Fox Zero didn't have it was a shame, but given that it came out on Wii U, it probably had a very small budget. So, you know, that's why it didn't happen. They just focused on single player. One last thing. Star Fox is another franchise that will play a part in Nintendo's overall multimedia strategy going forward. An animated project of some sort is in the early works at Nintendo's newly acquired studio, Nintendo Pictures, along with a few other properties. I'll have more on that end before too long. So I will say that I do buy into the idea of Nintendo having multiple sort of like animated or sort of CGI projects for a few different Nintendo studios to maybe market alongside some of their games. Not saying they'll be like full on like Netflix series, but maybe one or two could be. But yeah, they could have something like that in the works. They had something like that for Star Fox Zero, which is smaller. They outsourced that. But yeah, I could see something like that. I don't think that's too far-fetched. But do I think that this is like a legitimate rumor? I don't know. Honestly, like this one, I don't have any information that supports it. But I'll also say at some point Star Fox does have to come back. And I do think that Nintendo has had somewhat of a focus on bringing back franchises. So we've heard this rumor about F-Zero. We've heard, the Bandai Namco is working on a remake of some old action game from Nintendo, which could be a Star Fox or it could be a Kid Icarus, one or the other. So those are things that, there's Metroid Dread and there's Advance Wars. Nintendo, and then there's also Donkey Kong. Like Nintendo I think is showing that they are willing to go back to older franchises and give them a chance. And since Switch has already gone out most of the main bigger players already and they've been out for a while, now that we're so late into Switch's life cycle with an established audience out there already, this is sort of the best time to put out older franchises or new IPs and give them a chance to flourish or be revitalized. So bring it on. Bring on the F-Zeros. Bring on the Kid Icaruses. Bring on the Star Foxes. Bring on the Donkey Kongs, the Metroids, the Pikmins. These are some of my favorite gaming franchises that just need more attention. So, I'm all for it, but I don't necessarily have any reason to believe that the Star Fox report is real. But it could be. So, I'd love to see it. I would love to see it. But let's come back to live chat here. Okay, I see it looks like I missed a super chat from a while ago. Aaron Curdy, thank you for that $2 super chat. Very much appreciated. You asked, do you think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will have choices like Triangle S? I didn't play Triangle Strategy. From what I understand, that game is similar to Fire Emblem, right? So Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a real-time RPG. And what that means is all the action is continuously happening, kind of like a Zelda game, for example. Like the combat's just kind of happening there. Now, you don't necessarily press a single button and everything happens immediately. You sort of move around. You can apparently dodge all in real time. But you press arts, and they're pretty much immediate, but, there is a little bit of an animation that occurs you have to wait for before you do the next attack or special, and you kind of want to time them as to when you do them. So, it's not turn-based, and I don't know about the tactic strategy there, but you do have 6 different characters, and you can change them on the fly. They're all still fighting at the same time, doing their own thing, but you could swap to controlling them. And I know there's some directives you can offer your different characters to do while you're doing something else. So I don't know how that would necessarily tie into Triangle Strategy style, which I'm assuming is similar to Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem is more like controlling like larger groups, of armies, and you sort of tell different units to do different things. And it's not in real time, right? Xenoblade's in real time. So I think you should just try it out. If you're into RPGs, I think it's something you can get into very easily. I think it's one of the best out there. If you like good stories, especially if you're like a fan of anime stories, I think you'll very easily like this. Now, I'll say that Xenoblade 2 was super anime-esque. Xenoblade 1 and 3 are not as anime-esque. But still, I think they would appeal to that kind of audience. Alright, let's see here. Elemental Hero Shao, Link Dragon, Wolf King. Hello, good sir. What if we see info from Breath of the Wild 2 other than a direct? Like we see the trailer when they announced before. Could we see it at the Game Awards or a different event? So I think that once Nintendo decides to reintroduce Breath of the Wild 2, I don't think they're going to do it at the Game Awards. I think that they could give us information at the Game Awards, but I think it'll be after they reintroduce it to us at a different event, probably a September Direct. But I also think there's a chance that they announce a specific Zelda Direct or a Breath of the Wild 2 Direct as opposed to a general Nintendo Direct where we get that onslaught of Zelda information blowing it out. Or like, finally coming out from being quiet, right? But yeah, so either a Zelda Direct, or like a Breath of the Wild 2 Direct, maybe even more specifically, or the Game Awards totally can happen. But I don't see a Game Awards trailer happening as the first new information this year for Zelda. I think that it would be either in a September Direct or a dedicated Zelda Direct. Alright, let's see here. I'm going to try and sort of wind things down, guys, because it's getting late and my voice can only go on for so long. Debus added me. I'm still going to try and catch up with the chat. Just, I might not spend 30 minutes per question. Debus added me. I would guess that the sports games being released as semi-incomplete titles coincides with a change in culture in Nintendo corporate head office in Japan and North America. That could maybe be the case. They may have a slightly different strategy, but I don't think it's so much. But like I talked about earlier, I don't think it's so much about coming out with incomplete titles per se, but more so that with those style of games, these multiplayer games that have an online community, there's a lot of replay value already there. There's lots of hours of gameplay already there. They make sure to come out with a strong core, and then after the fact they release content to kind of keep the conversation going, keep players coming, to sort of keep that online player base going for a while and that conversation going to increase the sales and thus also improving upon that online player base. I think that's the main reason behind why they do it. Not so much because they want to get out a game really quickly and they can't bother to wait to finish the game. I don't think that's the intent behind it. What I will also say, I think that they do the designs of the games in a way where they make sure the core is established and they are developing in mind with some stuff that isn't fully ready yet that they do release after the fact. But again, I don't think the intent is to come out with an unfinished game per se. It's more having to do with that. Because, for example, you look at other things like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, or Kirby Star Allies, or Paper Mario the Origami King, or Metroid Dread. Yes, there's going to be updates, and yes, they have already DLC announced for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but we're not going to play Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and be like, wow, this feels like an unfinished game, No, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to be a 100 plus hour game for most people. Like, it's a huge thing. Now, maybe that's an exaggeration because everyone has different standards for RPGs, but it's Xenoblade Chronicles 3, by no stretch of the imagination, is going to be considered a short game at all. It's going to be loaded with content from day one. And I think, my main point here is that I don't think that this is a Nintendo now just releases unfinished games and patches them or adds content after the fact. I think this has more to do with the style of game and coming out with that content to keep the online player base going and also keeping sales and the conversation going. Look at the games where we do get that kind of content. Monster Hunter Rise, Mario Strikers, Switch Sports, Splatoon. All of those games have big online multiplayer segments. They're like the main part. They're like basically the main focuses of those particular games. Make sense? That's my belief, at least. So, Hello there, ASAP Bro. How are you? Yeah, I am playing solo today. That is correct. Megaton Menace added me. My problem with that business strategy is that because the game has little content in it, when I get it, I get bored quickly and stop playing it, and then when updated, I don't return. Well, maybe try returning if they update it, I guess. But also, if you don't feel like there's enough content to keep you going, then you're totally justified in that opinion, right? Like, that is totally, you're not wrong for feeling that way. And, I guess it's kind of one of those things where supply and demand, right? Like business, like, if this model isn't doing a great job of exciting a large player base, then Nintendo's going to pay the price of that, right? Now, you know, you could be like me, where you're just so busy, you don't buy the game day one, so once you get around to it, they've already added a lot of that content, right? Like with Monster Hunter Rise, Sunbreak, by the time I jump into it, there's going to be some more content in there. Or by the time I jump into Switch Sports, same deal. Or same with Mario Strikers, how they just added, they're going to be adding Daisy and Shy Guy. Have they even added them yet? I know they announced them. So, like, all those things are being added after the fact, and I'm going to enjoy them when I get those games, but, you know, I didn't start from day one. So, you know, it depends on everyone. Everyone also experiences games and plays games at different rates. So this is challenging for sure, but I think this is a person-by-person basis, and I guess ultimately does it come down to, does this impact more people in a negative way than it doesn't? Killer Aaron 67 has a good question, apparently. What if there's 3 Bowser Castles in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass Wave 2, since Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Wave 1 had 3 tour tracks? So I wouldn't say that's the same thing, because tour tracks are sort of like a game that tracks are coming from. 3 Bowser Castles would be from, hypothetically, 3 different Mario Kart games. So, you know, there's that. That said, I would love to see the Mario 64 Bowser Castle return. I'm trying to remember a few others. That one in particular I really like, so I would love to see that one return. I can't remember any others right now, but definitely like to see that one. I like the one in Mario Kart 8 already. It's actually pretty good. But I wouldn't necessarily be against it. It just kind of... I don't remember the others, so I don't know. But I would say in general, 3 Bowser Castles and 1 DLC pack wouldn't be the best idea. Well, you love Switch Sports? Very good. Good. I mean, like, from what I've heard, the game isn't bad. It just doesn't have enough content for everyone to everyone's liking. But also, it's a smaller game. It's $40. So that Nintendo quality. Metroid Prime remake might be a myth, honestly. Prime has aged really well, and Retro is actively working on 4. I don't see a need for the remake. I'd still love to play a Prime HD, though. Well, you know, the thing about Prime, the story behind it is that, we've gotten this information from Imran Khan and Emily Rogers, is that Retro Studios was playing around with a build of the initial Metroid Prime. They showed Nintendo, they liked it, they greenlit it as a full-on project to do, but also around this time, they also wanted Retro Studios to transition to making Metroid Prime 4 as well, because supposedly the initial project that we know has been restarted wasn't working out so well with Bandai Namco. So that's the story behind it, and with that story in mind, they've been working on both. But we'll see, right? We don't know yet. In truth, you know, you gotta take things with a grain of salt until it's confirmed. So we'll see what happens. The idea is, though, that it does come out this year. Killer Aaron 67. Could Wii Luigi's Circuit be DLC Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Cast Wave 2? If not, Wii Moonview Highway for Mario Kart Wii. I would love to see Moonview Highway. I would really like to see that one. I mean, Luigi's Circuit's also great. There's so many good tracks, so, you know, I'm okay with that. But Moonview Highway, would love to see that. Absolutely. By the way, I haven't said this yet, but I predicted that we would get the DLC, or at least announced by today, the 25th, and that has not happened, so I am wrong, and I said that I would be shocked, and I am. It still hasn't come, so I have to think something is off here. Maybe they announced it this week, so it's totally fine, but it is strange to me that the DLC hasn't been announced yet. If it comes out in August, they are falling behind to be on track to come out with everything by the end of 2023. They can catch up by just having a shorter interval with the next one or the one after, but it is strange that the Mario Kart DLC is taking so long to come out. Guy you don't know. The first 2 updates for Kirby Star Allies just add new characters with new levels for an extra game mode for each DLC character respectively. Oh, okay. That's pretty neat. But they added it all afterwards. So again, I didn't play through Star Allies. It just didn't seem like a good fit for me. But you know, like for Kirby and the Forgotten Land is huge. Like, I think that game has a wonderful amount of content, and I'm anticipating a DLC announcement But it hasn't happened yet, so, you know, we'll see what happens. Megaton Menace. I know Sonic Force is not a Switch exclusive, but I think Pokemon and Sonic is enough to fill a month. Yeah, it could. But Nintendo doesn't really rely on third-party releases to sort of hold them over usually. Not during the holidays. They don't really. They have so many games of their own that are coming out this year. So, you know, like Nintendo will release their own games on the same day as third-party releases. They don't care. In truth, there's so many Switch systems out there. So many people playing Switch. They don't really need to be selective about what comes out when. Not to that degree anymore. There's different kinds of people that are playing different kinds of games, and even if they don't get them at first, they're going to get them eventually, a lot of them. So, you know, yeah, like I said, I'll say that if we don't get an announcement for November, that's to your point, it is enough, but also, historically speaking, we've seen more. So, you know, it could go either way. Hakan saying apparently MP1R Metroid Prime 1 remake remaster finished in September last year. I did hear a while ago that it was done, right? So maybe it's one of those things that Nintendo's just waiting to release. Could totally be the case. Oh yeah, so Nishquick Pops is saying we should talk more about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Reviews come out tomorrow. I saw someone. What, TFS Soul? You got your copy of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 today? Pfft, that's crazy, dude. You are so lucky. You are so lucky. I didn't pre-order mine, so I'm just gonna pick it up day one, or probably not. It's one of those games that I think I'm gonna buy like a physical retail version for because I love Xenoblade, but I don't know. I might. We'll see. I'm definitely getting it on Friday. My predictions for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I think the game on Metacritic is going to be in the high 80s range. I'd love it if it would hit the 90 plus range, but I think there's just a legitimate bias towards Japanese RPGs in the West that I think it always kind of pales in comparison a little bit. And I'll also say that I think I'm also dampening my expectations of how well it's going to score, because I don't in my opinion, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I think it's going to be a 10. Like, it's going to be a 10. But I just don't think everyone's going to agree. That's just what I think. You know, I would we'll see. Like, I think the thing about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it just some people are just gonna be like, oh, it's too complex, or oh, the story's a little awkward, or the voice acting's not amazing. Like, they're gonna say little things like that, even though from what we've seen, the voice acting is largely improved, or at least like the lip syncing is largely improved over Xenoblade 2. The combat system is a lot easier to understand over 2 with the tutorial system. The visuals and performance have improved significantly over 2. Like, there's a lot of things that objectively seem to be better than 2. So you would think that would lead to higher review scores, but it's always a measure against what people are playing at the time. It's always like, you know, a feeling. But maybe, you know, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to come out and it's going to be one of those things where people are like, wow, this is like the perfect RPG. I'll say that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has less of that anime vibe compared to 2. And I think that's going to bode well for the Western audiences a little bit more, especially like critical reception. And I hate that because I love anime. Like, I'm big on it, but, you know, I'm still going to enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles. Like, I'm not going to enjoy... I'm going to enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles 3 just for... as much for what it is. Like, I don't need to be like super anime like I don't need that. I'm not saying that. But I also, anime stuff doesn't bother me at all because I like anime. So, you know. Still, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I think, as a Xenoblade fan, it's going to be amazing. I think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 objectively is going to be an easier game to play than Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's going to be easier to get into. I think it's going to be a more polished product. Like I said earlier, objectively, we've already seen the performance seems more consistent. We've already seen there's a better tutorial system. We've seen the lip syncing is better. We've seen them. I really like what they're doing in the combat system. It's like a nice blend of both. The world has a lot of artifacts from both 1 and 2. There's a very interesting story they seem to be telling here. A lot of mystery to be unfolded. Like there's a lot here. The dodge mechanic I'm actually really excited for. The Ouroboros mechanic as well. I love that you're going to be able to switch each character on the fly. You haven't been able to do that in previous games. So you're going to have a more active, full control of the entire party. And this time it's 6 characters. Something about 1 and 2 that bothered me slightly is that you would have these other awesome characters in your party, but you only use 3 at a time. So like there were these other characters you just couldn't use, right? And you would see them during the story cutscenes, but you can actually fight with them in the battle. So if you have a 5-person party based off the story, but you only use 3 at a time, it's a little off-putting, right? It takes a little away from the immersion. But now with 3, all 6 main characters are a part of the fights from the pretty much from the get-go. And there's even going to be an additional 7th character as well. So that's really cool that all these characters are going to be fighting at once. And you're going to have full control over the main 6 ones as well. So all of that has me very excited. The customization options, honestly, it seems a little daunting to me. But I'll figure it out. I'll come to my own conclusions on what I want to do with it. But still, there's a lot of customization options. You're going to be able to really experiment with how your teams look, how it plays, the composition, like all of that. There's a lot that they're doing right with Xenoblade Chronicles 3. There's a lot they're doing right with it. I'm super excited about it. Now, from what we've seen, the game isn't fully open world, and at first glance that may be a disappointing thing, but typically it's hard to tell a really good story with a full-on open world. But that doesn't mean the game isn't huge. The game is massive from what we've seen, and there's going to be very, very large areas that are interconnected, but it's not literally open world, but it's going to be relatively close to that. A lot of really large open sections that you can walk between. So I think it's positioning itself to where it's kind of almost like the best of both worlds, where you're going to have a very well done and told story, but still a lot of huge expanses to explore and enjoy, and a fair degree of freedom to that. That's what it seems like it's going to be the case. I am looking forward to reviews. I'm hoping the game reviews higher than I'm sort of preparing myself to see. I'm expecting high 80s on Metacritic. I hope it's higher than that, but I mean, ultimately, I don't really care about reviews because I know this game is going to be good. And like whatever score it gets doesn't matter to me. It's gonna be a 10. I know, like I just know it's gonna be a 10 to me. Like I know I'm gonna play this game. I'm gonna love it. Like it's kind of what, like, for example, like Zelda or Super Mario. Like I know if a new 3D Zelda is coming out or a new Mario's coming out, I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna love it. Or same thing with Mario Kart or Smash Brothers. Or well, I mean, Metroid's had some inconsistency, but I even liked Other M. I thought Other M was fine. Now, granted, when I got Other M, I didn't get it immediately. I got it from a bargain bin for $7. Played it during a spring break back, like when I was like, I don't know. It was a while back. Back when the Wii was relevant. And it was fun. It was just a good time. It was a good time. But I didn't care for the story. I just played through it and enjoyed it. It was great. Point is, Other M's a complete aberration. But in general, there are just certain game series that I know I'm going to love. I don't need reviews to tell me I'm going to love it. And Xenoblade is one of them. I've never been disappointed by a single Xenoblade game. I love every single one. So, Xenoblade 1, loved it. Xenoblade X, loved it. Xenoblade 2, loved it. Xenoblade Torn to the Golden Country, loved it. Xenoblade Future Connected, loved it. Am I going to love Xenoblade Chronicles 3? 100%. Now, will it be my favorite Xenoblade game? That remains to be seen. Gotta play through it, right? And then also, over time, see if it's replayable, if I like going back to it, how it hit me, how it resonated with me overall. But, yeah, I am just ready for this. I'm ready for this, and it's gonna be a good time. gonna be a really good time. And DE Fox, the mods work is never done. Thank you, Super Chris. Thank you, DE Fox. You guys are great. So moving through here, okay, I think we're pretty much reaching the end of tonight's show. It's harder for me to go on longer when it's by myself, you know. Sean Corrigan, Water Temple music, nice. Water Temple is great. It has some issues. I thought 3DS fixed the main issues with it, in my opinion. I did recently play through the Water Temple for Ocarina of Time. And it's tough. It's tough. For me, every time I do it, there's always like something I just forget. I now know what it is that I tend to forget. I tend to forget that in the middle column area, there's like a room hidden under the first floor that you can go through. Because there's a platform that moves, that when it moves up, it sort of reveals a passageway under. I always forget about that spot, and that's what usually holds me back from progressing. But I did it. I now know there's that. I think there might also be like a passageway at the end of Dark Link's section, but I'm not sure. That might be revisionist history, so don't hold me to that one. Joshua Adamy, have you beaten the previous Xenoblade game and extra stories? I just finished the first one in June. I just finished Torna. I'm in chapter 4 of Xenoblade 2 and getting Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is Friday. Okay, so I mean, it sounds like you're playing in chronological order, which is cool. That's totally cool. You know, you're maybe like a third-ish, somewhere between 30% and 50% done with 2. You still have a lot of game left if you're in chapter 4, but I have played through and completed every single Xenoblade. Yeah, there's 5 if you count the expansions of 1 and 2. They're smaller, but you know, I've played through all of them from beginning to end, and they are all great. I've replayed Xenoblade 1, I guess twice, and now I'm about to finish Xenoblade 2 for the second time. I only played through Xenoblade X once, and I only did Torna of the Golden Country once and Future Connected once. But yeah, it's really good, and I think it's interesting that you're doing it in like order of story. You're doing the prequel before 2, which, you know, could make the story for 2 make more sense for you, because there's a lot of like weird mystery that you don't quite understand if you don't know what's going on, right? But if you play Torna, you might understand somewhat. Having Hope 5 is going to be the best Xenoblade game yet. I think it has a really good chance to be. It could very well be. It's gonna be tough because there's some great ones, but it's gonna you know put up a fight. Guy you don't know. Open worlds are starting to become a cliche in modern video games, if they haven't already become a cliche. Like I think being open world for the sake of being open world is a problem. You know, like I think there's something to the idea about calling a game open world because it seems more hype, more ambitious, more exciting. And I do think open world games have a lot of potential for really appealing to that sense of adventure, right? And I love adventure. So open world is like yeah, that's where I think a lot of games should be. But also, if every game's open world, it can get tiresome. Sometimes we don't need to have every game be this giant, massive world that takes hours upon hours to really explore and enjoy. Sometimes we need games to be simpler. You know, sometimes we need games to be something where you can just kind of pick up and enjoy. Or sometimes we just need games that, you know, it's like a puzzle you'd play for a few minutes, or a race you play for a few minutes, or a fight you play for a few minutes. Or it's something that's more of a narrative, right? That carries you through a particular path. It's a ride, as opposed to a playground you explore. And you know, there's different ways games can be done. Not everything. There's not well, one shoe fits all, right? And there's different types of open worlds as well. Not everything's the same. So, you know, I think I agree with that, right? Like I like we take a look at this Sonic game that's coming out, Sonic Frontiers, and I have this fear and this sense that they simply made it open world and gave it a lot of Breath of the Wild like elements to kind of bring in that audience, to kind of excite people about the premise of an open world Sonic game. But is it really the appropriate way to handle Sonic open world? Or better yet, should Sonic games even be open world? You know, Sonic is a tricky beast though. Sonic's one of those things where, like, I don't think they fully solved how to transition from 2D to 3D appropriately. It's challenging, very challenging, but you know, it's I don't like the I agree that not everything needs to be open world. Now for Xenoblade X was a great open world game. 1 and 2 felt kind of open in areas. I think 2 could have been better if it was open, though. I'll say that. Like, there's elements of 2 that I sort of hope get remade. I hope Xenoblade Chronicles 2 gets remade someday. Not saying it could be 6, 7, 8 years from now or longer. I hope it gets remade someday, because I think there's more they could do. Like, if you play through the game, they make references to other towns and cities, but there is no evidence of these towns and cities anywhere on the maps beyond beyond dialogue of characters. So you're just sort of left to think, okay, where are they? Are they in the butt? How do I get to the butt? And when I say butt, because every area is like a giant Titan creature that you live on. Like, I would love to be able to get to the head of Gormott. I'd love to do that. You see the giant head moving in the back, you can't do that, right? You can't scale all the way up in More Ardain either. Like, there's kind of a mountain, but you can't go all the way up. You know, Uriah, you can kind of get from head to tail for that one, I guess, but it's not like a clear thing. Like, there's chunks of the Titan you can't actually explore. There's just there's areas you explore, but not all of it. Like, basically Gormott, you just explore like the right side of its back. More Ardain, it's basically just like the left arm or something, or shoulder, something like that. Uriah, you do sort of explore from head to inner rib, stomach cavity to tail to an extent, so that one kind of works. Point is, I think they could maybe expand on it a little bit. And apparently for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, they initially intended it to be interconnected, like you could sail through the Cloud Sea. You can't really see the other Titans, from what I know, when you're on another Titan. Like, it would be cool if you could see the other Titans in the background while exploring a particular Titan, but you can't. So it would have been neat if they could had some system like that, but I think maybe they thought about it, but it just kind of extended the game for no reason. They couldn't think of a nice, compelling way to just have you sail the Cloud Sea. So, you know, I don't know, but it just sort of like, there's certain elements where you see these giant, fantastic areas that you want to explore more of it. So I hope in 3, it's designed in a way where you can still explore a lot of that. You know, it does a better job than 2, where you see certain cool things and you can't really get to all of it. So that's just something I'm kind of hoping for. Like, I'm hoping the remains of the Orion Titan and the Mechonis sword, we can climb that, right? I hope we don't just walk up to him and be like, oh, there it is. Look up. Okay, there it is. It's on the cover, but we can't really explore it. That's going to be a little disappointing. So hopefully do something for that. Now, I see I got another super chat here. Another $2 super chat from Taker610. Thank you very much, Taker. Taker says, still holding out hope for Wind Waker Twilight Princess HD at September Direct. Maybe they announce that September Direct is a shadow drop. You know, or it comes out December or something. I'm okay with that. You know, not gonna give up hope. I think it could even still be like a social media announcement. You know, I don't think we necessarily have to wait for September Direct if it is coming this year. I'm not convinced it will be, but, you know, it's in the cards. Guy you don't know added me. Well said. Something like Metroid Dread can offer a better sense of discovery and excitement than a game with a generic, uninspired open world. I think Metroid Dread does a great job. Metroid Dread to me is pretty much a 10. Like, it's a very good game. Maybe it's a 9, but like, I don't know. It's a really good game. It does a great job. The world is interconnected. There's a lot of nuance there. And it doesn't have to be a massive 3D open world. Like, Metroid Dread is super fun and exciting, but it's a 2D game. Like, oh, 2D games, like, yeah, 2D games can be really good. So, yeah, right there with you. Well, I think we've pretty much reached the end here. I do see some people talking about Xenoblade, so I kind of want to like check in real quick. Oh, I see you guys are talking about like the fan servicey elements of some of the blades from Xenoblade 2. Honestly, I don't really care. Some of it's a little awkward, some of it's kind of cool. I'll say that. But in 3, they kind of do away with that. It isn't that there aren't like cool characters in 3. There are, but it's not as blatantly fan servicey. I think there's clear that there's a little bit of a bias towards that in 2, but a lot of them are sort of optional blades, so it's whatever. I also feel like a lot of the designs for the blades in 2 are a little tacky. Not all of them. There's a lot of really cool ones, but there's just some of them just like, this is weird. But it's also, just kind of I guess it comes with the territory with having to make so many different characters. But also, I'll say that part of the issue with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is it was developed in different parts. It wasn't one cohesive team working on it at the same time. For 3, it's all hands on deck. It's all more cohesive. So I'm expecting a more consistent design throughout. And I think, I think 3 is going to end up probably resonating with more people than 2. So even though I love 2 so much. So it doesn't hit everyone the same way, Taker610, does Nintendo own Retro Studios? To my understanding, they have a 100% ownership of Retro Studios. Retro Studios is absolutely a Nintendo internal studio. It's Nintendo. Retro Studios is Nintendo. Same thing for Monolith Soft, by the way, the team behind Xenoblade. They are 100% Nintendo as well. Charles Trudell, wouldn't make sense that 3 is more cohesive, right? It feels that way, right? So yeah, guys, that's all for now. Thank you everyone for showing up. If you could leave a like for the stream, share it out, that'd be very much appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Consider joining as a member if you haven't, if that's something that fits you. But we're gonna call it a night for now. Anyways, everyone, take care. See you later.